6:30. I'd like to bring this study session of Urbana School District 116 to order, but before we begin tonight's meeting, I want to acknowledge the tragic passing of one of our 7th graders today. I'd like to have a moment of silence, please, in recognition of the passing of a bright light. Thank you. Roll call, please, Ann.
Member Ogalski?
Here.
Member Orr?
Here.
Member Hasanatka?
Here.
Member Hall is here, and President Pulaski.
Here, we have a quorum. Are there any additions, corrections, or modifications to tonight's agenda? Hearing none, we will next move on to citizen statements. If anybody wishes to make a statement before the board, please fill out a goldenrod sheet in the back of the room and then hand it to our recording secretary, Lori Johnson. First up is C.K. Gonzalez.
I'm C.K. Gonzalez. I thank you very much for your service, and I thank you for hearing me this evening. If you don't know me, I served on this board for 12 years, 10 of those years as its president. When I was the board president, we conducted the first equity audit the school district has performed, and we initiated systematic changes to start addressing the achievement gap. I led the effort that resulted in the passage of a $23 million referendum with 83% of the vote. And that started the renovation cycle at that time for our schools, which will be completed as you move through the Wiley enrollment. With John Dimmitt, I worked to build a financial model and foundation that continues to serve the district to this day. Since then, I have volunteered in the schools, I've mentored in the schools, I've raised and donated money for the schools through the Urbana Alumni Association and the Champaign-Urbana Schools Foundation. I care about these schools. I attended these schools, my husband attended these schools, my children attended these schools. I believe that public schools are the foundation of democracy, and I believe that strong schools are essential for healthy communities. I'm not going to spend a lot of time tonight telling you things that I've written and that you've had a chance to see and that I've given you in writing. I've shared my op-ed with you, and others will be providing details. I urge you to look carefully at the numbers and to overcome any preconceptions you may have about who will be affected by this plan and how. It seems worth noting and reinforcing in your considerations that about half of the students you are proposing to displace and disrupt their educations are low income, have IEPs, and/or are students of color. This has not been discussed or centered in this process, and that concerns me a great deal. I'm asking you as board members, the stewards for Urbana's public schools, responsible for the health and efficacy of our schools, to consider a concept that's really important to organizations that's known as the trust thermocline. In nature, a thermocline occurs in very large bodies of water where the temperature drops very slowly from one layer to the next. It's almost imperceptible as you go down through the warm water. And yet at a certain point, the water changes from warm to extremely cold. That point is known as the thermocline, where the shift between the warm water and the cold, the supremely cold, is sudden and dramatic. Organizations, especially ones that require commitment and emotional connection like schools, experience trust thermoclines when slowly eroding trust over time shifts to sudden and dramatic departures. This happens when continuing to participate is overcome by the lack of trust in the organization to meet people's needs. The emotional investment they've made in the organization is finally outweighed by the effort to leave it. People flee when you hit the trust thermocline. How does this apply to Urbana? I'd like you to step back and use your stewardship role to look at the big picture. In the 1990s, when I served on this school board, Urbana had 5,000 students enrolled. Today, When Urbana has stayed constant or grown in the intervening time, Urbana has 4,000 students enrolled. In the comparable time period, Champaign went from somewhat more than 8,000 students to 10,000, going on 11,000 students. My concern is that many people in the dual language process have been unheard, told they don't count, or that they don't matter, and worst of all, that the effect on their children isn't being considered in the process or doesn't matter, and what effect that has on the school district as a whole and commitment to it and trust in it. I fear we may be closer to a trust thermocline than we realize. There's another concept here that's important, which is the intent-effect dichotomy. No matter how well-meaning one is, there are times that the effect of our words and actions are different than we intended. There are many good intentions on the Dual Language Committee. I credit them and I acknowledge and appreciate their service and effort. The effect of their process, though, I think is very different than anyone understood or intended. Urbana needs strong schools where children are learning and thriving. The pandemic has been difficult for everyone, children most of all, and student learning most of all. All you have to do is look at the school report cards to see that. None of us want Urbana's school report cards to look like they do right now. We all want to pull together to do whatever we can to support strong student learning. Your first and foremost responsibility is to serve as stewards for a school system that provides the best education this community and our teachers and staff can provide. Please, please, focus every bit of your attention on that. Please slow down or stop this proposal that leaves so many unanswered questions, is against so much of the evidence, has excluded so many voices, and has very likely significant unintended consequences. We have a large group of people in this community who are devoted to supporting our schools. Please bring us together and let's work together on solutions for providing the very best possible education and learning environments we can for every student in this district. Thank you for your service, and thank you for hearing me.
Thank you very much, Tina, both for your service and for your comments tonight. I'm going to ask John to fix the timer so that it beeps at the end next time, please. Next up is Chenxi Wu. Excuse me.
Hello, my name is Chenxi Yu, and I'm a new Leo parent. My daughter's name is Wyoming. She just joined Leo this year as a first grader. She loves her school. Every time I go there to pick her up, she wants to play more. So, as you can understand, late November, as we receive a survey from the school asking about us, what do you think if your children has to be moved out of Leo school? It comes as a shock. Since that moment, I've been working to contact a lot of school administrators and a lot of board members. I really appreciate you guys giving me so much information and bring me up to speed on what's going on with respect to Urbana School District, with respect to the dual language program. I learned a lot, but still I want the board to consider and discuss some of the things I see in the study that just does not make sense to me. First, historically, for the last 6 years, dual language program on average takes in 68 students. And then for the new proposal, the latest version you're going to see today, they're proposing for the next 6 years, only 63 students per year, kindergarten student per year. So how are we helping our Hispanic community, dual language community, by reduce the service we're going to provide to them? That's my first point. The second point, again, in the information you will see today, from that survey where I was first introduced to this idea, 241 parents replied to that survey. Across the board, DPW, Leo, duolingo, monolingual. Only 49 said they support this proposal. Only 20% support this proposal. So is the board, is the school administrator really ready to move forward with a proposal that has such low community buy-in? I think we can do better. we can get more community buy-in. Third point is that we've been focusing so much on the duolingual student. And if this proposal pass, set off the domino effect, I estimated at least 445 students, elementary students, will be asked to move school, which includes 156 duolingual students will be moved from DPW to Leo. That's 1/3. And then another 117 potentially will be asked to move from Yankee Ridge back to DPW. Have we heard anything about them? Have we done any study about the families and students will be impacted by this? Do we know if they wanted to pull their kids or pull themselves out of the friends and the schools they are used to back to another school? And then even more, 172 current monolingual Leo students will be asked to move out of their school. What's tragic about this is that this displacement has all the parents up in the air. We have no idea where our kids will be going. We have no idea what's going to happen. We have no idea what's the availability of the other schools that can accommodate the needs of this 172 displaced students. And as you can see from the survey results, less than 3% of this group support this proposal. Less than 3%. I hope you hear the community is crying here, including me. I feel incredibly sad, and I feel I've not been seen. I feel my family and my voice does not matter. I'm an immigrant to this country. I come here because I trust the democratic process in this country. I hope you guys do that for us. Do that for every single one of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Janet Leroy.
Good evening. My name is Janet Leroy, and I retired last May after 36 years. I'm currently enjoying substitute teaching. I think I've been in just about every class at Leo, and I'm currently filling in for the art teacher. Here's what I know. Size matters. According to the current contract, the mandatory adjustment class size for 4th and 5th grades is 31 students. For 2nd and 3rd grades, it is 29 students. I taught a 4th grade class with 31 students after they had been in 2 appropriately sized classrooms in their kindergarten through 3rd grade years. That year, I had 5 petitioners. I asked why they had been accepted. Apparently, there's some unwritten rule that children who've spent 4 years in a building be allowed to finish. That was the most difficult year of my 38-year career. Parents were not happy. I could not provide for the children in the same way they had been used to in the previous 4 years. That year I had 5 students who qualified for grade skipping, but they wanted to stay with their peers and remained in 4th grade. I could not provide them what they needed. I had 5 children that year who had just arrived from China. Thank goodness for Google Translate. By the way, there were no candidates for the aide position until the 2nd semester. I will always be grateful that I had some parent volunteers that year, and Board Member Hall and her husband also volunteered weekly. I strongly considered quitting. Then COVID hit. I was able to fumble my way through that spring. The next year, when I had 18 students on Zoom, I was able to make weekly visits to all of my students. Weekly visits. Porch parties, we called it. I worked closely with the other 4th grade monolingual teacher in order to provide all the students with a similar experience. There's no way I could have done that with 31 students. Here's what I know. Class size matters. If the dual language program is in a single building, class size will increase because they will no longer be bound by that reduction in class size as being a program within a school. How because I have not heard an explanation. Just how will this bring up scores of the students served by this program? The scores of my students when I had 31 students, I don't think we had to take tests. Thank goodness. They would not have gone up. I'd also like to remind the board that our current third graders had their kindergarten year interrupted by COVID. Their first grade year was largely remote. Second grade was learning how to do school again. And now they are finally in a groove. As the current art teacher at Leo School, I have the third graders. They're learning how to do school. Sending our current third and fourth graders, regardless of their school, whether it's Dr. Williams or Leo, to yet another building, yet another disruption in their career, seems unnecessarily thoughtless. I also know that many parents do not understand they will be displaced. Case in point, parents at recent conferences were very eager to join the dual language program, and then they were told, no, you don't get to be in the program. You are going to be sent to another school. They didn't understand. They have not yet received a letter in the mail explaining what the possibilities are. Please include everyone in discussions regarding the dual language program. Please include all the staff. Please include all the parents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Tony Allegretti.
Good evening. I'd like to start with some comments I read online from an Urbana resident. First made these in March of 2011. He said, "We made the decision 6 years ago to move from Champaign to Urbana so that our children could attend Urbana public schools. The principal reason we chose Urbana was because of its neighborhood schools. We wanted our children to attend the same school the other kids in our neighborhood attend. And we were pleased with the administration and staff at Yankee Ridge when we visited prior to purchasing our house. All these schools are fixtures of this city and are at the heart of the neighborhoods that they inhabit. They increase the property values of the homes surrounding them, provide community spaces for organizations in the city, and bring people together in common cause and shared experience. They make Urbana, Urbana." This same individual was commenting again in 2019. "Our family chose to live in Urbana because of the great neighborhood schools. We wanted our 4 kids to go to the same school that their neighbors did. We wanted our daughter, who was a different race from my wife and me, to attend a school where there would always be someone who looked like her in the same classroom. The multicultural student body in Urbana was also a huge draw. We wanted all of our kids to be educated among people that were not like them. They will be far better prepared for life in the real world, having friends from all backgrounds." That individual is the president of this board, Mr. Pulaski. And I agree with you, and I share in those statements that you made. And I hope that those policies that you campaigned on will be factored into when you vote on this issue. But what the administration continues to propose is an unworkable consolidated dual language program. It will result in de facto segregation of English learner students, a classification that's based on their English language abilities. Notably, the English language learners is a thinly veiled classification based on race, color, and/or nationality. Leo can't handle the class sizes of the current program and its future expansions. And what other people that know far more than I do about numbers and statistics and school administration will tell you is that the program is increasing. It's not remaining stagnant or decreasing, as the administration has suggested. The class sizes will increase to a percentage 40% higher than the district average of non-dual language program school classrooms. The dual language committee itself has presented to you in October that there showed no increase in the school class sizes, roughly 80 students per stream. You're going to be shown this evening a decrease of 23%. The administration keeps moving the goalposts here, and they're going to put in any numbers they can to make this workable to this board. What this program will result in, or this decision, is English learner students being admitted at higher numbers and fewer native English speakers introduced into the dual language program are going in at lower numbers. What you have is a separate school for Spanish speakers in an unequal classroom size to their detriment. There's no good intentions exception to segregation. It's a violation of the school board policy, section 7-30. The school board is supposed to, and they must, prevent the segregation of students and and they must eliminate separating students based on classes of color, race, or nationality. And it's also against the Armstrong Act, which was originally passed by Charles F. Armstrong, a state representative of the 22nd District. He served 5 consecutive terms from 57 until 65. This was the first law enacted by any state to combat de facto segregation in schools. And what that law requires, section 10-23.1 of the school code, requires school boards to take into consideration and prevent the segregation and eliminate the separation of children in public schools based on color, race, and nationality. This was upheld by the Illinois Supreme Court in 1968 to apply to de facto segregation, which includes racial imbalances in schools not created by the deliberate intent of the school board. It is still a violation of the act. This board is bound by its own code, its own policy, and state law. Consolidation of this program is antithesis to this. Please vote no. Please keep the schools diverse. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jody Miller?
Hi, I'm Jody Miller. I'm a 15-year teacher here in Urbana, and this is my 23rd year teaching. I've taught in 3 states, and I'm going to be a little bit hard to follow, possibly, because I just finished getting my mom out of the hospital last week, and I need to rush back to her. So if I don't make sense at some point, or I lose my place, I apologize in advance. So I just have a couple of things that I was wanting to go over. I want to first preface this by saying that I love my staff, I love my district, and I fully support that my DL staff and my monolingual staff all have concerns right now. And I fully understand the desire to have your closest working colleague in the room next door to you, because it is extremely helpful. And I understand that. I also understand that we also are here for our students, and that we're here for doing what's best for all of our kids. And so I wanted to read a couple of concerns that I have, and then a couple questions that I have. So one of my concerns is the lack of specific supports for the LEO monolingual families and their children, especially those of low SES and ELLs in our community, especially at LEO, who will be displaced because of this if it is voted yes. I have many students in my room. Right now I'm over capacity at 23 students and just lost a couple, so just in the last week. And so am now back in line with the appropriate class size according to the contract. However, almost half of my students have low income, and they have extreme needs, and they attach themselves to staff at our school. They attach themselves to services at our school. And asking them to be moved is very difficult for them. The majority of the students in my classroom, their parents were unaware until last month when the survey went out that this was going to be happening, because they've received no direct notice. The majority of what has been given to them are papers and backpacks that say dual language discussion, dual language committee meeting, dual language program discussion, or open forum. And the parents didn't think that it applied to them. They didn't think that anything that was going to be discussed at that was going to impact their child's education. And a lot of them had thought that the proposal up until a couple weeks ago was to add a few DL rooms to a LEO, and their students would still be there. They thought that their children would be put in the DL programs, because nothing has been given to them directly to explain this to them other than the survey. And that is very hard for our students to understand, and their families to be able to support them. As a teacher, we just want what's best for our students. And like I said, some of the families are just confused, and they are stressed about this situation. And as teachers, the monolingual staff, we are trying our best to support them while not stepping on toes of the district or our DL colleagues. It has been very difficult to be in the building with words being said both at the school board meeting and in the community that Leal is some sort of, high-income bubble in Urbana, because we put ourselves out there for our students and we know about their lives. And it is not as easy as it sounds. There are parents and families that are going to have a big trouble with this if they have to move, because right now they're already struggling getting to school on a daily basis. Another thing that I had a thing is that if this proposal gets voted yes, there'll be around 40 staff members, both monolingual and dual language staff, who will be asked to move classrooms. And some of you don't know what that's like. I've done it many, many times. It takes days and days and days of packing and sorting and making sure district materials are separate from personal materials, and it takes a lot of work. So my question is, where in this plan that you will be reading tonight does it address the cost for a moving company to pack all of our rooms, sort them for us, and help us with that? Because, like I said, my mother had a brain bleed a year ago. She had a stroke 5 months after that. She's been living in my house, and I've been doing my best for her and my 2 teenagers on my own. And there are many other staff that have similar situations of a different flavor. We do not have the time in our lives to pack up for days and days and days and days, nor do we have the money to do so. And if you were going to make this change, please find a way to put that in your budgets, because we need a moving company. Lastly, some of the other things I wanted to say were addressed by other people, but the class sizes is an issue. Appropriate class size will probably come up in negotiations. And right now, the dual language program is projected to be at capacity on the first day at Leal in every classroom except for 2. And if the class sizes are reduced at all in the teacher contract at negotiations, it will be less. And they will not fit at Leal. And the last thing is that kindergarten enrollment projections, they are now all of a sudden, after the last 3 slideshows that have been presented, we're 4 classrooms of DL in kindergarten. This current one says all of a sudden 3. And I'm wondering why that is, because 3 out of the last 5 years, we've had 5 or 4 kindergartens. So those are my comments.
Thank you very much, Jody. Next up is Joe Colin.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today. This is an issue I'm passionate about, but I do feel somewhat self-conscious being up here on a day where the tragedy happened at the schools and things like that. So apologies for tone or things like that. But, last month, Laura, you sent out an email that I thought was a really good faith effort. It was to put parents in touch with administrators to talk about what a transition plan could possibly look like. A couple weeks later, along with Sarah Jansen, I had the opportunity to meet with Jennifer, and with Joe and Lupe, and with Kim in what I thought was a really good meeting. 1 hour meeting spilled into 2. I found each member of the administration engaged and thoughtful during this meeting. They were receptive to feedback we had on the process, transparent in barriers they saw in following their own recommendation, and really invested in hearing what I had to say about what needs to be in place to successfully transition hundreds of youth. Mind you, this occurred during the week where Urbana was facing threats of violence in their middle and high schools, that the administration, particularly Dr. Ivory Tatum, created time to engage with us and be so present in that meeting was truly remarkable. I told all of them how impressed I was in leaving that meeting and worked tirelessly over the next month to dispel thinking from my neighbors that this administration did not have the best interest of our kids and all of our communities. Based on this meeting, I cannot tell you the level of disappointment I had when I opened the slides Friday night. To be clear, it is not because the district is sticking to their initial recommendation. I was prepared for that result as a result of the meeting in October, and I went to that meeting following the meeting in October fully focused on helping form whatever transition plan that we could. But I was disappointed because what we discussed at that meeting and what was told to us by the administration was not reflected anywhere in the slides. I was very impressed when Dr. Ivory Tatum said, "No one on the administration has any interest of making a recommendation that did not have the majority of community support." These words were repeated and met with nodding heads by everyone in the room. I was I was so impressed after all of the work that they were still willing to say, hey, we want to listen to the community at this point. No one can look at this data and say they have the majority support for this proposal for any subpopulation. And just for clarity, neutral responses cannot be seen as a sign of rapport. Brian, you couldn't administer a survey for a study with neutral support, let alone displace hundreds of kids. Paul, you asked for more data to be collected on this issue from the community. I would like to hear from you what the data indicates, whether you see that data that you requested and you now see that there is a great community support for it. We don't need a pie chart telling us in the slides that the administration and DL teachers support going to a one-school model. We get that. We've heard it at every meeting. What we need is the pie chart that shows not a single subpopulation reached 40% in supporting the administration's recommendation. Finally, it was incredibly disappointing to see that what the administration put together for the transition plan. During our meeting, I discussed from a mental health perspective as a licensed child clinical psychologist how I thought a model that enhanced parental support for the change, consistency in classroom peers, and continuity in school leadership in the form of teachers, support staff, and after-school staff was critical. This was based on research concerning the impact of adversity exposure more broadly, which a school transition is, in my area of expertise, and non-routine school transition specifically. We discussed during the meeting the complexity of the issue given logistical concerns, and administrators seemed heartfelt in acknowledging that any move to a single DL school had to be matched with a nuanced approach to transitioning ML youth. In a nice moment, we even joked that there was a single slide discussing the issue, as was the case in October, was insufficient. So how have the discussions been translated to the presentation? Again, we're still on one slide. What new considerations have been added to help deal with the transition plan since the school board meeting in October? From what I can tell, a welcome postcard. I'm not kidding. I don't mean to spoil anything for tonight, but you will get to slide 42 of slide 44, and it will be the first time the transition plan is discussed. The transition plan will include brochures, field trips for kids to other elementary schools, a social emotional learning night, and welcome postcards. There will be no mention of what schools they will go to or how that process will come about. What research suggested that a welcomed postcard would help? What community members thought a welcome postcard would help their family transition? I am picking on the postcard intentionally because it is one of the many examples of a decision the administration is making that defies research, community support, and is a holistic misunderstanding of child development. This is a major adversity we're introducing into youth lives, especially ones who've already transitioned from the COVID-19 pandemic, and especially for the nearly 50% of students who qualify as low income. A welcome postcard doesn't help here. Even if you're the most ardent supporter of housing the DL program in one school, and even if you think the best location for that is Leal Elementary, you cannot vote on a proposal that literally has no transition plan. And you said in October you were risk adverse. There is nothing more risky than voting for a proposal where there is no plan. So I ask you to stick to what you did in that meeting, engage the community, follow the data, and make a plan that can help everybody in this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Next up is, Connie Ivor. Sorry, did I pronounce it? Can't read the handwriting. Oh, sorry, I couldn't quite read the handwriting. Connie, thanks.
Okay. Hi. Everyone before me has spoken so eloquently, so bear with me. I'm just a parent. So I'm Connie. I'm a parent of 2 children at Leal. One is in the dual language program and the other one's in the monolingual program. And we've had great experiences with both of them so far. Our kindergartner comes home and teaches my 2nd grader Spanish that he's learned in class. And our teachers have been wonderful and supportive to my children's unique needs in both of the programs. And we've found Leal to provide some calm in the chaos of raising small children, predictability in this ever-changing world, and it's felt safe in the pandemic. Our experience thus far is what I hope all parents can experience when they send their kids to school. And for this, we're grateful to the teachers and the staff and administration that has made that possible so far. So if this is not the experience that other Urbana students have had, then I definitely think there's room for improvement. And we can strive to make this kind of experience widespread rather than take it away from those who are finally beginning to adjust to this new routine. The solutions presented by the DL committee has created this really divisive atmosphere. And now it feels like there's just so much momentum going forward to pass this through. But even more questions have arisen in the past few months that we don't have answers to, that other people have spoken to more eloquently. So I'm just asking that you please take some time to consider the consequences of these solutions without rushing into making a decision. I think we could utilize some of the research that these parents and community members like Joe before me have compiled. And I think that we can just work together to find a more creative and inclusive solution that supports the emergent English learners and the teachers without disrupting the monolingual students. So I worry that I'm being selfish when I'm asking you to vote no, but after talking with some other parents, I know that my experience is shared. Families at Leal don't want to be displaced, and neither do their teachers. So I'm just asking again, all of you board members, thank you for your time, and committee members and administrators to just reconsider. And do you believe that these options presented are the only options available? Are they the most creative and long-term solutions we can come up with? And if you have any doubts about the proposal, please vote no or delay or something. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Tim Gibbs is next.
Thank you. My name's Tim Gibbs. I am a father of 2 at Leal and 3 in the home. I'll keep this brief. You all have a big day. First, thank you for your time, your dedication. I've reached out to many of you to meet with me, to help me understand what is influencing you and what you all feel personally is guiding these decisions you're making. And many of you responded to me. We met both in person, via email, and that helped me feel like I could hear where you were, and you even listened very well to my concerns, so I appreciate that. The DL committee has aroused significant energy in the community. I don't know if they anticipated that, but now that it's here, there's a ton of attention, research being done, and I am asking you to vote no on this and encouraging this DL committee to open up to the inspired energy and include that into this problem solving. That's it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Sarah Jansen.
Hi. I didn't write out all my speech this time, so wish me luck. I want to echo Joe Cohen's comments about that meeting that we had with the administration, with Jennifer, with Kim, with Joe and Lupe. It was a really positive environment. And in that meeting, you know, Jennifer, you very, very strongly said, absolutely, we cannot support this if we don't have majority support. And you said it several times, and I was really encouraged by that. But you don't have majority support. 37% of the DPW DL families who are being moved said no. Only 3% of those recently surveyed, the monolingual families, said no. Like, there's clearly not a majority support in either of those populations. Even if you look at the English learners who this change is supposed to help, you know, the response rate is so low that it only covers 8% of those families. There's no way we have a majority support. And so, like Joe, I was really discouraged when I saw those, the committee's recommendation, despite the lack of support in any demographic. That was really hard for me, especially given the major disruption that this causes. Another point that I want to make is on the new projections. So as you know, I've spent a lot of time thinking about the projections, and I want to make sure everyone understands the difference between the old projections and the new projections and what it means for what I've been telling you all. So under the old projections, we assumed this whole time that there were going to be 80 students coming into this school. We'd need room for 80 students in the dual language program. In some ways, I thought that was even like lower than it should be because it didn't allow for program growth. And in the last 3 years, the program has grown 10%, 10%, 10% on average. So 80 to me seemed like a reasonable assumption that didn't allow for any program growth. And all of a sudden, the number has changed from 80 to 63. And there's no explaining that. The only explaining of 63 is that they've purposefully decided that this program will be smaller. The only way to accommodate it at Lille is to have a smaller program. And even with their new projections, there's still increased class sizes, because that's the only way to have it at Lille is with increased class sizes. Now, if they had assumed that original 80 number, the class sizes blow up, right? It does not work. 44% more students than the district average. But even with the current projections, the class sizes are a lot bigger. They're 28% larger than the district average. And here I'm talking about specifically 2nd to 5th grade classrooms, because the lower grades, they're so close to the contractual max that it doesn't really matter. But at the upper grades, it does. So 28% bigger, even under the new projections of a smaller program. What that means, if they're constraining the size of the program, the only way to do that and meet the needs of the EL families is that they are purposefully committing to not admitting as many English-speaking families. Now, that's a choice they can make, but it's a surprising choice when this is like seen as the crown jewel of the district. It's the #1 thing that we advertise on our website. This is the best program, one of the best programs in the state. So to suddenly be proposing a change that really restricts the size of the program and access to the program, to me is a surprising move, and certainly one that we should be discussing, right? Like to make that shift without even putting it out there that that's what we're doing seems misleading. It seems like a problem. The next thing I want to comment on today is just this general perception about the demographics of monolingual families at Lille. One of the teachers made this comment too, and I appreciate that because she's worked with these students. She knows these students. I looked into the numbers because I do have a student in monolingual classrooms, and I started this idea that Lille parents are privileged, and this comment that in the slides that those families being asked to move are those with the resources. That's just not factually correct. 45% of those students qualify for free and reduced lunch. Half of the IEPs at Lille are in the monolingual program. That's going to be hard for those families. And the last point, and I'll keep it short, the proposal currently lacks support from the English learners in the community. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
I actually have some notes I'm going to pass out.
Okay. Please, Julia Hockenberger, you're next. If I'm reading that right. Hockenmeyer, sorry. Please feel free to start.
Okay, sounds good. Hi. I'm Julia Hockenmeyer. Hi. I speak to you as a parent of a Lille first grader. I don't know if can you hear me?
Yes.
And as a long-term resident of Urbana. I've been here for like 15 years. And I'm strongly opposed to the single school plan for a variety of reasons, right? So it seems unwise to make any change to the dual language program before it's been evaluated, before the district's equity audit has been completed, before the planned redistricting process has started, before all elementary schools, including Wiley, which may receive many displaced LEAD students, even though that doesn't appear in the transition plan slides that we're going to see later today, have been renovated, with a likely need for an additional elementary school building in the near future to accommodate growth. If I understood the discussion on October 18th correctly. And while you, as a board, only have like a few months left in your term, right? And of course, at a time when like students and teachers and everybody, the whole community is still recovering from the effects of the pandemic. Right? So moving to another school would be highly disruptive to all affected children, including our own daughter. You will remove these children not just from their classmates, right, from their teachers, but also from their reading and language specialists, right, who have worked really closely with them, who they're very attached to, right, and also from their friends, right, and their after-school providers, right. School isn't just where they go to learn to read, right. School is really where they live, where they spend their days, right. They haven't done a lot of play dates because of the pandemic, for example, right? The after-school program is really important. I haven't seen this addressed at all. And a lot of these kids are still behind in the academic and social skills because of the pandemic, right? The teacher keeps reminding us that these children are not where they should be, including the so-called privileged monolingual children, right? And so I was actually encouraged when I heard on October 18th that there was a plan to grandfather in the children that are at Lille, right? I haven't seen this discussed anywhere else. I hope I didn't misunderstand this plan. I would like to see more of that. I'd like to have a clearer understanding of that. I know that there was a mentioning of this during the redistricting, but it also appeared in the dual language slides. So this would be like a really important thing for families to understand. I'd like to point out that the single school plan is also going to have detrimental effects on all children in the dual language program. Right? Half of them are going to be displaced, and all of them are going to be affected by the plan to increase the class sizes. Right? This will only worsen the outcomes of the DL program and make it more inequitable. According to Lille's own school improvement plan, right, in May 22, its Latino students, which are presumably mostly in the DL program, performed between the 1st and 6th percentile in reading, and between the 3rd and 8th percentile in math. Right? I thought these was typos. I did not believe these numbers. And both ranges are, of course, significantly below the non-Latino students at Lille. And I fail to see how increasing the DL class sizes is going to help close this very significant achievement gap. Anecdotally, the DL program doesn't seem to work well for non-Spanish speaking students either. Right? Although our daughter is now thriving in the monolingual program, right? We don't speak English at home, so she's not monolingual, but let's call it monolingual. She spent kindergarten in the dual language program at Lille. We had to pull her out at the end of the year because it became clear that she was unable to understand or speak even very simple sentences in Spanish. She spent a year in that program. She didn't learn any Spanish, right? She knew the numbers, she knew the colors, that was it, right? And as a linguist, right, it's really unclear to me how this is possible for a child, right? The only explanation I have is that if you put a 5-year-old in a fully immersive environment and they don't pick up the language, it's either because they're not engaged or because the environment isn't actually immersive. Right? So something is like clearly wrong here. So I'd really like to urge you to evaluate this program. Right? Clearly something isn't working the way we're intending it to work. Right? I was very, very disappointed by this. Again, I have a linguistics background. I was super excited by this program, and I was very disappointed that we had to pull her out. As a resident, right, I'm very concerned about removing Lille's status as a neighborhood school, right? I know that a lot of proponents of the proposal have said, well, we don't really do neighborhood schools in Urbana, but actually the website advertises it everywhere, right? Everywhere you say we have 6 neighborhood schools, and it's like a really important aspect of Lille, right? As somebody who lives close to Lille, I'd like to understand how the busing needs, right? So just briefly, right? You say that busing needs will not substantially increase, but on the October 18th slide deck, there's a mention that the buses for Lille and DPW are because of the dual language students. So I don't so those will continue to be bused, right? So all the other students that are being moved, presumably that's just going to lead to increased buses. I don't understand how that's not going to happen, and I haven't seen any analysis of that. I'm going to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Leslie Sherman.
Hello. I want to first off, thank you all for your time on the board. I want to thank also the school central office staff for all the work you do. I really appreciate what you do for my children, both of my children, one that graduated last year and one that's in the middle school now. And so I really appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness and your care on these matters and every day with our school district and our students. I'm here today because I was a Lille parent, and I live in the West Urbana neighborhood. And I'm really alarmed by the discussions around the dual language program. For the 9 years that my children were at Lille, because they didn't really overlap much, while I was there, I volunteered weekly or monthly, depending upon the year, when I could, in the classroom with students. So I even worked with dual language students when I ran a robotics team, where we had 3 robotics teams of 30 students one year at Lille. And a third of them were dual language students. That said, when I was in the classroom, otherwise my volunteer time was with the monolingual program. And I was really happy to hear people talk about the fact that we are not, unlike it was mentioned at the October school board meeting, that these students that are in the monolingual program will succeed anywhere. I disagree with that. They will not. That's not necessarily the case. It's not just coming off a pandemic. When I volunteered at Lille, I worked with those kids, helping them with math and reading. And there were a lot of kids in the monolingual program that had challenges. So there are students. They're not all just a bunch of privileged kids from West Urbana or wherever. And our neighborhoods that make up the Lille family are not just West Urbana. And I personally took offense to that in the comments that were made. And I was really disappointed hearing that from a school administrator or from central office staff, implying that they would not be impacted. And one of the things that I want to just highlight here is that I find one of the things that really upsets me is I moved to Urbana because of Lille. That was one of the decisions for my family to move here. If you look at the the scorecard, what you're talking about doing, if you take all the monolingual schools and you remove Lille as a school, as a neighborhood school, you are dismantling one of the 2 highest performing elementary schools in this district. And not just performance in terms of test scores, you're also looking at behavioral issues. I'd be really interested to hear from central office about behavioral issues that are coming out of comparatively across all elementary schools. And I know that's not something that can be discussed with the public, but as a school board, you can ask about that. You're dismantling a system, a school that is successful and is not just that, is bringing families to Urbana. Urbana needs as many people and families coming to our schools, and to our communities as we can. Urbana is not in high demand like Champaign is in many ways. And so I know for my neighborhood that, and I know a lot of people think West Urbana, it's a privileged space. But my neighborhood, we're constantly fighting development of high rises coming into our neighborhood. And what helps us to maintain and bring in families that want to live there is the fact that we have Lille. And that's a huge driver. And maybe that doesn't seem as important to you, but to me that is. Also, one of the things we're talking about with we're moving so many students to other schools, you have it to do such a huge move to make a whole school that is dual language. Really, to me, I wonder, why are we not doing this as part of a strategic plan? If this is something we really want to do, why don't we do it right? and make sure that we have capacity, whatever building, we're going to do that for growth. I think a lot of people have made some really good points around that. Why aren't we doing that? We started a strategic plan. I was part of those discussions and multiple groups within that at the beginning of the pandemic. That process has stopped. Pandemic, understood why. There's a lot to deal with. But why are we not going back to that strategic plan and creating that and making the clear path? I actually am in support of a full school dual language school, but I think that needs to be done more thoughtfully with data. Why are we not waiting for the audit, equity audit? Why are we not taking that into account? Why are we not looking at what are the issues with our dual language program? When you have 30% of the dual language committee said, I need more information, why? The 30%'s a lot. I'm really confused why it's considered we're railroading. This is a railroad. It's also, you're talking about redistricting without going through a redistricting process. You're redistricting over 200 students, 400 students. And that, to me, is almost criminal without actually getting input. I have no idea where, if someone were to buy, a neighbor were to buy a house, what school would you actually district to? That's not been part of the relocation plan. And I ask that you ask school board members, ask about that, because that's redistricting. What you're doing is you're redistricting all of the neighborhoods that would go to Leal. But that's not being part of this. That's not been discussed. And so I really hope that you will say no, and you will put this as part of a strategic plan, which our schools really need, and think of it going forward. Can we leverage Wiley? The Wiley needs to be renovated. Why are we not thinking more about
I'm sorry to cut you off.
that?
I'm sorry.
I'm just saying, there's a lot of other options for us that we can build a school that will work for our students.
Thank you, Ms. Sherman. So we're down to our last one. If anybody else would like to make a statement before the board, I think there's still goldenrod forms in the back of the room. You can fill one out and hand it to Lori Johnson. Our last speaker so far is Catalina Herrera Almanza.
Good night, everybody. So I want to give probably a different, fresh perspective. I moved to Urbana because of Leal School. I am Colombian. I am a Spanish speaker, native Spanish speaker, and I want my kids to be exposed to that. My kids will be starting kindergarten next year. When I learned about the dual program, I thought that it's a recipe for segregation. I think that if it is something attractive of living in Urbana and attending Leal School is the diversity of race, of socioeconomic status, of languages, and this is not what I think that I'm gonna be facing in the next months. As all of the people have mentioned before me, and they have already experienced that, I don't see clear and rational arguments of why, not building on the dual program, but just erasing it, right? And just for the Latino perspective, it's very important for native Spanish speakers to be exposed as early as they can of other languages, of other races, right? Because what we want is just to grow in diversity. So I think that because I learned English later on, I can guarantee that it's the earlier that they are exposed to different languages, the better. And this is in an environment where we need to grow more diverse, where we need to be resilient to shocks. And part of this resilience to shocks is to avoid changes that are in our hands, right? The pandemic was not in our hands, right? COVID, we needed to deal with it. But I think that for what I have heard, and I am trying to build into the community, is that there are things that we can do now without destroying the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So last call for speakers. All right, seeing none, we'll move forward with our agenda. There is no call tonight for an executive session after our meeting. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Student ambassadors report.
Hello, board. It's good to be back. Good to see everyone's face. To begin, I would like to just send words of encouragement to all of our students in Urbana School District. It's been a very difficult couple of weeks and months and years, and I do send my condolences to the family of the student that we've lost today. It's not motivating, you know, when every day it's always something different, but I do want to say that we have to continue to fight strong so we don't make ourselves stereotypes, because that's what we don't want. And so I do want to send those words of encouragement. Continuing on, I would like to talk about MAP testing. My personal perspective on MAP testing is that it adds stress to already stressful circumstances. And when I talk to other students, they see MAP testing as a waste of time. And when I say, do you take it seriously? They say, definitely not. I'm just being honest. They will say, well, speed past it, it took me 15 minutes. And so I do understand that this testing is important because it tallies how our school is doing, and it tracks our academic achievement. But I think it's also important for us to enlighten all of the students on why it is important, because it's not being taken seriously, honestly. And so I want to have a meeting with our other student ambassador, and possibly with Principal Nance and Dr. Ivy Tatum, coming up with ideas on how we can motivate and promote the importance of this testing, because as of now, it's just honestly not being taken seriously, and it's just seen as a big waste of time. On a more positive note, I do want to say that in all of this negativity, I have been able to find some positivity over at King School, thanks to the principal, whoever that lady is. And I have been able to do lesson plans for the first time, and I really was able to expand my horizon working with kindergartners. So if you can press the link. I was able to be a substitute helper in this class, and I was able to make my lesson plans for the first time, and I was there during our e-learning day, right? All of those days I was there for the full day, and I made lesson plans for the whole day. So here's an example. Oh. Okay, you should have it now. So here's an example of if you were in room 5 with Mr. Michael. That's what they call me. This is what you would see. So we always start the day off, and I'll say, what's today? And they'll be like, T is for Thursday, December 1st. And I'll always say, okay, let's have a great day. So if you continue the Google, so we always go through our schedule, our learning schedule, right? So they already know what they're learning for the day, and they already know what and how they're going to learn it. So for literacy, they always have different stations, right? One of the stations, I brought my props, if you could pass this around. So some of the stations are highly dependent on what word family we learn for the day. The last time I was at King, it was it, like F is for fit, and then B is for bit, right? And then they would have, in one of the stations, they would have to draw a line. J would go for jet, right? Because that's the first letter of the word, right? If you continue the slide. So that's just one of the stations. And then we'll always go through our rules for our daily rules, so we all know how to stay on the same page. So they'll say R is for respect, R is for reliable, L is for listen, L is for learning. They're really able to identify the first letter of the word, and that's the important part, right? So when I say L, they already say, oh, Mr. Michael, that's learn. Or that word says listen, because I see the L. So that's the important part. Keep moving. So in our morning meetings, right, we always start with 4 zones of regulation, because I think this SEL is very important, being able to regulate yourself, because it's very important to know how you're feeling so you can say what you need, right? Me being there for the first time, I was welcome to a lot of these students that I did not know. And so when they needed something or they gave me a stanky face, I didn't really know what that meant because I really didn't know them. So now they were able to say, Mr. Michael, I'm tired, so that makes me in the blue zone. I possibly need a drink of water. And so this is what we did every day. And then the link actually takes us to a wheel, right? We would spin the wheel, and it will have different examples like you fell off the bike and your friends were laughing at you. How would you feel? And they'll say, some might say, I feel sad, so I'm in the blue zone. Some might say, I feel lonely, so I'm in the blue zone, and so on and so forth. Keep moving. So these are just different examples. You can just keep moving. I will show different faces, and they would tell me what zone the person would be in. And the important part is for them to be able to identify what trait is the person feeling and why. So when they feel the same way, they can speak up and say how they're feeling. So, yeah, there are just a lot more examples. They love those. So here's so the last time last time I was with them, our word family was it. So if you continue, you will see F is for fit. They would say so. Fit. F makes fit. F plus it makes fit. And I have this one student named Asim. He will keep coming up to me and say, Mr. Michael, I'm learning today. One time he went to his principal and he was like, you know what, Miss Turner? I actually learned something today. And I just felt so proud at that moment. And so as you can see, they just keep going over. These are just more examples of what they will go over for the it word families, because again, the identification part is very important. And then we always had story time. They really loved the stories. They always loved the stories. It was time for them to calm down. And after the stories, we would go on to, I believe it was lunchtime. They always asked if I could sit at lunch with them. But sadly, that would usually be the time for me to go. They say they start crying, but, I just had to go. So that ends that segment. So I just wanted to show everyone what I was able to do during our e-learning, what opportunity I was given by the principal. We don't have to talk about her, whoever she is, to help and work with these students. And they were amazing Urbana School District students. So if you go back to the original slideshow. And I did want to let everyone know that please tune in to tomorrow's morning show, as I will be featured. I will have my own story. I am being recognized for working and volunteering at the center, Urbana Neighborhood Connection Center. Please tune in. It was Mr. White, Matthew White, gave me a great opportunity to shine my light, and I would really appreciate if everyone could tune in. And lastly, I just want to end with shout-outs to the great Urbana School District staff, Mr. McBride, Mr. McAndrew, all of my teachers. They've always given me the path to greatness, and that's all I want to leave you on. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for shining your light here. You're a joy to have here. Thank you. Next up is our first administrative report, update from the district's crisis planning team.
Thank you. So I was going to talk tonight about crisis messaging apps. So we were tasked about a month and a half ago from the crisis committee with evaluating several apps, bringing back 2 or 3 of the best apps to the committee, where we would have some additional presentations and evaluate those. So we met with representatives from these 5 companies were kind of the top 5 crisis messaging apps in the area. Crisis Go, Rave Panic Button, Raptor, Navigate 360, and School Safe ID. So we talked with all of them about the different features that their products had to offer, got some initial pricing back from all of them, and brought a few forward to the crisis committee. We brought forward the Crisis Go, the Rave Panic Button, and then we talked a little bit about Raptor as well. Since the last crisis committee meeting, events in the district have transpired very quickly, and the need and urgency for a effective way to communicate with students and staff has become much more apparent. In emailing through communications with the crisis committee and talking to our superintendent and other staff, we decided that it was time to move forward with an app. The leading app that we were looking at the time was Crisis Go. Checked a lot of the boxes that we had. So this app includes a phone app that you can install. The phone app will bypass silent and vibrate settings if there's a larger crisis. There's also a computer console, and then this also does SMS, email, and text notification. This also syncs directly with Skyward so that we can pull rosters nightly for classes, and we can pull staff data nightly so that we'll always have updated stuff. If you ever have to hit a button to initiate a crisis, you'll know that it's always the right people you're sending it to. Some other features that made this most appealing was once you initiate the crisis, you can have bidirectional communication with the classrooms. You can send out a request for check-ins where it pulls their classroom roster for that hour, and they can check off what students are there and what students still need to be accounted for. It also has a system for reunification. If you guys recall the reunification drill that we did earlier this year, this has something where you can send out a QR code to parents when they come to pick up their student. You can scan that QR code and it initiates the reunification process. You scan them one more time as they're leaving, and it keeps track of all of the attendance of the students that you're tracking. One more feature, which I'll touch on a little bit later, is the teacher assist. Not all emergencies are something where you have to lock down a whole school or evacuate a whole school. Sometimes there's classroom level emergencies where you have some students who you need to deal with and you just need some assistance from your administration. This allows a one-button press where a teacher can notify administration in the building and anybody else who's designated so that they can come deal with issues in the classroom without notifying the entire school. So I'm not going to go too deep into it, but this is basically what it looks like. This is from a live demo. So this is if you have the app on your phone, the app on your desktop, or just a personal phone. So this is, you have whatever buildings you have access to. You can initiate emergency from any of those buildings, and then you can do the same thing on the desktop. And then on your personal phone, right now it shows nothing because it's just, you don't know there's a notification yet. And then when you send it out, it sends out the alert. You can have mapping information about what building the emergency's at, and then the same thing will go out to desktops. The desktops, since we manage those internally, we can push the app out to all of our teacher Windows and Macintosh desktops so that they can be able to get those. And just so quickly, I will show you on my phone. I have it installed, if I didn't just click out of it. So there's, to initiate things, instead of going to type an email or a Skylert where you have to kind of go through several steps, you hit the one button at the top. And then that brings up kind of a list of the 9 or 10 crises that we decided that we wanted. and then you can pick one. So I'll hit severe weather alert, and then slide to send, and it's a 5-second process instead of like trying to get somebody on the phone or sending a text message. So very quick and easy. It's designed to be able to implement things quickly without having to think a lot. And this is what the reunification side looks like. Our internal staff will have a list of students. They can check them in, move them to different locations, and then parents, when they come, will have a reunification code that they can share at the door. This is what the staff assist looks like. Once you initiate the staff assist, you can also have back and forth text communication, and then that will actually be able to alert staff. And if it's enabled on your app, which is not required, once you initiate that, they can also have the location from your phone where that emergency is taking place. And so this is how it will go to whoever we have designated. So it could be the SRO and principal can all respond to those. So the key for this is for emergencies and crises. This is getting people where they need to go as quickly as possible in the case of a critical event. The other thing that I didn't talk about at the beginning, this also allows us to do our drill management through this tool. Right now, I think there's a manual process that Kim and her team work on to make sure that we have all of our compliance for drills and make sure that everything's checked off. They do a great job, but it's a lot of extra work. This takes care of all of that. And additionally, when you go to implement the drills, you're using the system, practicing with the system that you would be using in a real emergency or crisis. For staff, there's a customizable front page for the thing that tells them how to install things and troubleshoot. And then one other thing, for certain crises that you have it enabled for, when you hit that one button on the device, it not only notifies the crisis team, district personnel, it also notifies 911 immediately with the location. Once staff arrive, we have the ability as district administrators to share information with those first responders so they can also get the location where they need to go, and they can also be involved in that two-way communication process. Particularly if it was an intruder event, you can have that continual information and continual guidance of staff of what they need to do as things are coming through. So finally, before I close, I just wanted to make this clear. This isn't going to be replacing any of the other structures we have in place. The kind of pyramid of communication that we have to disseminate information through the district is very important. This is kind of filling in a piece that we were missing and struggling to achieve, especially over the last few weeks. So we'll still, you have your one-to-one communication that if you need to get a hold of an assistant principal or principal, you can still always get them with text or phone. We can still have emails that go out to staff. We're actually working on building some more structured email groups so that when we do have situations, particularly where there's a lockdown, that we can notify everybody who needs to be notified in one fell swoop, including food service who might be in the building, or custodial or other outside agencies, first student bus services, so that they have the information they need to be able to make decisions about where their people are going and what they're doing. And then the Sky Alerts are still great for sending out non-emergency notifications to family, or kind of medium crisis notifications to family where it's not a we're evacuating the school right now, we need to initiate the reunification plan, but if we're just letting them know there was a soft lockdown earlier today due to an incident, that's probably the best way to do that and not instigate the crisis system. One other thing I didn't talk about yet, there's also standard operating procedures. The district has some operating procedures, but these, once an incident is initiated, whether it's a fire or a weather-related event, it will have specific standard operating procedures for each of those events, and those just pop up on the people's phones who need them, and we can customize those. We're again working with Kim and Dr. Ivory Tatum to make sure that those align with what we want to do in the district. So our rollout schedule for this is very ambitious. We talked to the Crisis Go people last Wednesday and finalized our purchase by the end of the day on Wednesday. We were able to, my team put in a lot of extra hours and did a lot of extra work. We have the app is up today, as you saw on my phone. We're still working on the rostering and some of the other features that we need to make it specific for Urbana School District. But we are on schedule right now. We should be doing a training with the Crisis Committee on January 18th. We will be doing a training and a tabletop demo where we're able to kind of run through a test emergency, work with our radios, which we've also recently reprogrammed so that they're interoperable between all the different schools in the district, and kind of run through a scenario with them. On the 23rd is the first batch of Monday meetings, and we're going to start rolling this out to district staff. And then we've talked about having the standard operating procedures and the training drills up and ready for the spring scheduled drills. A little later in the spring, there's some additional modules that we have that are going to take a little more time. There's a Safe to Speak Up module that can go out for students that not only lets them get the alerts on their phones, but that also lets them report things anonymously to school administrators, specifically like bullying or violence or issues they're worried about in the school. There's also the E911 integration. We'll have hopefully up very soon after the 23rd, but that's going to take a little bit more time because there's a little bit more government regulatory steps that we need to have in place. So if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anyone have any questions? Go ahead, Robbie.
When you said roll out to staff, is that something that every classroom teacher is going to have this app?
Yeah, we're going to be doing it through the buildings, so that's going to be at their Monday meeting for the whole buildings. Depending on what individual principals want to do, we probably won't do the whole tabletop drill with the staff, but at least give them all the information about the app.
Well, I asked that because if you are having all of the individual teachers, for example, have this app, then you make the assumption that they have smartphones. And so I don't know if does the district pay for all their cell phone plans and such?
We don't make that assumption at all. As I mentioned, it was on one of the earlier slides. If you don't have the app, this still goes out through SMS messaging, and it still goes out through email. It still goes out through your district computer that's in your classroom.
Any other questions? I'm just kind of, is there going to be like a recurring cost to the district to participate in this application, or?
Yes. So there were of the options that we were looking at. This was not the most expensive one, but I think it was the second most expensive of the 5. Almost all of these apps have an annual yearly cost. We were, and I thought I had a slide, it might have been hidden in there, but I can pull it back up. We were able to negotiate the cost for this one down an additional 15% on that hectic Wednesday, last Wednesday, before we proceeded with the purchase of this one. And then we also found out at the same time that the other one, the Rave panic button, the one that we were looking at, had an additional cost to do the Skyward integration, which brought them a lot more close to parity. And I can find those numbers for you in a little bit, but I think this one was down to right around $10,000 a year.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions?
Yeah, just a quick one. The Safe to Speak Up app that you added, the module that could be added on, don't we already have something at the high school and maybe also at the middle school? I remember talking about this a couple years ago about kids being able to, oh, that's gone away now? Okay, thank you, because that was, I couldn't remember if that was going to last in perpetuity or if it was just a couple of years.
It was a special grant. We were working with Dr. Dorothy Espelage when she was still local. I think it was called Upstander. I can't remember the name of the app. But
Yes, and it was a self-reporting
For
app,
self-reporting, yep.
and so it didn't have any of the features like this for crisis. It was just basically an app where students could self-report incidences that happened, so appropriate staff could respond.
Okay, so the difference for this new one being that it could still be used for that sort of thing, but also for more immediate threats or...
Yeah, it has all your crisis plan in it, your rosters of students, checklists of what to do, and then messaging. It's all encompassing.
Okay, so the Safe to Speak Up, I'm asking because, you know, we've had students come to us before and feel like they need to have a place to be anonymous and trusted, and if they could use this secondary app, is there a way for, even though it's anonymous, is there a way for kids to then feel like if they need follow-up, they can get that follow-up from staff? And, you know, how is that disseminated to the appropriate staff at the secondary buildings?
Yeah, and in the app, you can report things anonymously, but you can also, there's a narrative section, so you can put to contact you with your name in that section.
Okay, and for our previous app, did we have much success with that? Did we get use out of it? Did kids know it existed?
you know, it was kind of a small group. I don't know that it was, you know, widespread throughout the high school. It's been several years since we've used it because it was kind of proprietary to the grant that, and when the grant ended, it kind of ended. So I don't know, Kim, if you have more information than
It was
that.
before I came here, but we were actually doing the same thing simultaneously at Danville when I was there.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was more so, it was part of a research study with Dr. Espelage.
Mhm.
It was a pilot, but it just never got to a point that it was really widespread.
Okay.
Right now, we're using a Google form that we created last year for during that time when students were experiencing the sexual harassment. So we still have that, but this is going to be way better than that.
Okay.
Than just a simple Google form that students can go in and report incidents. So.
And the added benefit of having everything under a single pane of glass is that it's something they're familiar with. If you're using it for drills, it's also your reporting structure. It's also where you can let people, where teachers can instigate or initiate incidents. So once it's all familiar and it's something that you're using a couple times a year anyway for drills, the familiarity hopefully will lead to people using it for the additional features as well.
Yeah, well, and thank you for that, because like, as Ravi said, you know, I don't want to assume that teachers all have smartphones or that they know how to use apps such as this. So, I mean, I would hope that if we are taking on this secondary module, that it's going to be trained with our staff, especially the clinical professionals and the people who are working with the kids in crisis mode, that they know how to use it and then help the kids, so that it's, if we're paying for it, we may get, you know that we're getting our full use out of it and everybody is aware of how it works, because, thank you.
Right. Anyone else? Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. We have a single action item tonight involving the Cunningham Children's Home Urbana School District Shared Use Agreement. I guess Todd's going to tell us about that.
Yeah, we talked about this at the last meeting. I outlined this renewal of the shared use agreement with Cunningham Children's Home that we have had formally in place since 2015. It's time to renew that, and so we would ask for approval of that tonight.
All right, thank you, Todd. Is there a motion?
I move to accept the agreement with the Cunningham Children's Home.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Member Ogalski?
Yes.
Member Orr? Yes. Member Hasanatka?
Yes.
Member Hall votes yes, and President Pulowski.
Yes, our study topic tonight is the dual language program review and evaluation.
So Dr. Dr. Weemelt and Mrs. Riccone are
I guess
primarily take the lead.
they're coming up. I'm going to take this time to acknowledge our camera operator tonight and technician, Anna Seaman, who does a fantastic job getting us on UPTV and out on YouTube. Thank you so much for all your help.
Good evening, and my name is Dr. Joe Weemelt, Executive Director of Secondary Programming, Multilingual Programming, and Alternative Education. I just wanted to start, Lupe is going to start us in the formal presentation, but I wanted to just, I know that I missed the moment of silence from today's situation and passing of a student, but I wanted to just take a moment and acknowledge the whole day, and acknowledge our district administration, Dr. Harvey Tatum, for several administrators that were at the school today supporting UMS through this. I also want to acknowledge the teachers and staff, Mr. Cooper, Principal Cooper, and students. I was called to go help assist, just due to the nature of what was happening, and I was really taken aback by the collaboration and teamwork and the way in which the school approached today's situation. It's a student that I knew very well, very close with him. We eat lunch about every Wednesday together as a part of a lunch group, and we met with friends of his and their families today at 3:15. It's been a day, right? And so I just want to acknowledge that, because it's been a tough day. And I just wanted to open with that. I know I missed the beginning announcement and moment of silence, but I just want to acknowledge the family, and send my deepest condolences to them and the passing of him. So thank you. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Joe.
And remind us all of the day.
Okay, good evening. As Dr. Weemelt mentioned, is this one working? No. Oh, there it goes. Hello? Oh. Thank you. As Dr. Weemelt mentioned, I'll go ahead and get us started. As a reminder, these are the committee members that have been providing information regarding this proposal for this semester. As you can see, there is a mix of dual language parents, staff, administration, as well as there are 2 monolingual representatives on this committee, one of which is from the UEA. There are a variety of parents. We were able to add some parents this year as well. As you can see, there are also parents that are district staff, so they wear 2 hats in some cases. So for this evening, our plan is to discuss with you the options that we had mentioned in October, as well as the recommendation that we had in October, as well as give you an overview of the information that was requested of us, as well as go through the parent survey results. The committee did have some discussion recently as we were looking at the preliminary results, so we did want to share that discussion with you, and then our final recommendation and discussion. So as a reminder, when we met in October, these were the 3 initial options that we had discussed with you and had asked for a straw poll. And during that straw poll, the committee was given direction to continue to proceed exploring option X, which, as a reminder, this is what option X was. So that is what the committee has been working on over the past month and a half. Go ahead, sorry.
So just as a reminder, the original recommendation earlier in the school year, option X, was to consolidate dual language at Leal Elementary School for the 23-24 school year. And the formal vote, the timeline has been that the formal vote would be at the next board meeting on December 13th. So as we proceed, we just wanted to, a lot of the beginning slides are just reminders and overviews of the process of where we've been. And so in October, when we surveyed our dual language committee, these were the results of that vote in terms of choosing Leal. In our October meeting, on the next slide, there was a request from the board to get a little bit more information as to the folks that marked, I'm unable to answer at this time and I need more information, which was 35.3%, to see if there was a way to get a better understanding of why and their rationale for choosing additional information. So this is just kind of a summary, executive summary, so to speak, of those responses. So this represents what was said by committee members as to why they needed more information. So just want to clarify that it's not necessarily administrators or the committee overall specifically saying this. This was just reasons that people put in the survey for why they need more information. So that you can see there's like pros and cons, so to speak. That's literally the first bullet, but folks that were leaning towards it, folks leaning against it, the reasons why they wanted more information, etc. The next slide, as part of the question was the rationale for Leal, right? We had folks that were surprised that no one voted for Dr. Williams and the reasons for that. And so these were some of the reasons that people put as to why in the survey they voted for Leal. And so these were just individual people's comments, not necessarily reflective of everyone's opinion, just how individual people responded. So I know there's been questions or comments tonight about one of the bullets regarding families with more resources being asked to move. Whether different members of the committee agree or disagree with that, that was what someone put. And so that's why it was listed here, because it was requested. The next couple slides are also in regard to questions that the board had at our last meeting. One was to have a better understanding of the teacher translation time and the ability to use a formal interpreter. And so this was just additional feedback, cost proposal, but also teacher feedback. We talked with teachers about what this process would look like and other staff who oftentimes are working with translations or interpreting. And these are some of the reasons, some concerns around that. It's definitely something that could be explored, but there were some more worries or concerns regarding the hiring of interpreters in a more full-time capacity. And then this slide, a part of the work that the ongoing work that we want to do is looking at the 10-year historical evaluation of student achievement within the program. One of the challenges that we're facing and why we're looking forward to working with the Center for Applied Linguistics is to work across all the different assessments that have been given over time, that have been changed both locally by district decision making, but also broadly speaking by state or federal requirements and shifting those assessments. So it's been a challenge. We don't have one single assessment, as you can see, that would start from when the program started and continue other than Access, which is an English language proficiency assessment. And once you reach proficiency, you don't take it again. So there's a lot of students could reach proficiency in 3rd grade, 5th grade, 8th grade, and they wouldn't have taken it again. We could see who's reached proficiency, of course. But just so we wanted to highlight that. We still are working on, obviously, the program evaluation through the Center for Applied Linguistics and are looking to better analyze the 10-year trend of how students are doing longitudinally in the program. And we'll be presenting that April, May upon completion of the program evaluation. Okay, get back over to Lupe.
Okay, so I'll be going through the next many slides regarding the current enrollment and projections and how we came to these numbers. So to start, you will see that these were the numbers at the end of October based on the October class counts that were submitted for dual language classrooms. You can see how many classrooms are being used across building, which is 21. I wanted everyone to see the enrollment of kindergarten over time. I also wanted to point out that in this slide, the kindergarten enrollment numbers here include students that applied into dual language. So they're not necessarily students that were automatic entry or that qualify for bilingual services. So as you can see, it fluctuates every year. One thing I did want to point out is that if you look at the trend, we have only needed 4 kindergartens in 4 of the past 11 years. And that was in some cases because we were in 2 separate buildings. So for example, last year, 2 years ago in 2021, we had 4 classrooms, but had we been in one building, we really could have just used 3. If you look in 18-19, we had 5 classrooms. That's you, you're driving, sorry. My co-pilot is. In 18-19, you'll see that we had 5 classrooms across both buildings, but based on the numbers we had that year, we really could have only had 3. So if you look at the comparison between years, you'll see that, like I said, it fluctuates every year. So one thing that was added to this presentation based on some feedback that we have been getting since Friday is how the number of kindergarten classrooms is calculated every year. So every year, the first indicator is how many students are at early childhood that are K age, meaning they're going to be kindergarten the next year, and they are emergent bilingual Spanish speakers. Every year at the beginning of the year, I aim high and say, oh, we're probably going to need 4. So I just want to clarify where the 80 came from. However, based on current enrollment that I now know at early childhood, currently we only have 25 K-age students that are Spanish speakers that could opt to participate in dual language. I also want to point out that sometimes of these kids, these 25, for example, over the summer, they may opt to not do dual language. They may opt to go to King and be in the self-contained ESL program. So for now, I'm looking at 25 kids at early childhood. I did speak with a principal at early childhood. They are doing everything they can to recruit more families. They have plenty of empty seats at early childhood, should you know anyone that would like to apply. So we would love this number to get higher, but as it stands, this is where the 25 comes in. This I wanted, it was brought up, you know, as far as the projections, what about kids that move in or what about kids that move out? So for the next 2 slides, you'll see that this is the average number of kids that are added to the classrooms after the start of the school year. So kids that once class is established, we didn't know these kids were going to arrive. We welcomed them. So that you'll see the average, again, it fluctuates every year, and it's, you know, higher in some years, and some years it's lower. So that's where these averages came from, which will be used in the calculations for the projections. As far as the drops, did the same thing. These years where you don't, what? As far as the drops, you'll see that some of these are blank because these classes were not dual language classes at the time. If you recall, we rolled dual language up starting in 2012 and did not have a full K-5 program until 2016-17. So again, looking at the number of kids that drop, that leave the district, go to you know, other schools for a variety of reasons why families drop, specifically in dual language, these were those averages over the course of the year. That doesn't account for kids that were with us in May, but maybe over the summer left. This is just kids that drop after the start of the school year. So these numbers, so as I had mentioned, for next year, I would be looking for now at 3 classrooms based on that 25, plus the average numbers of move-ins, possibly kids that leave. So by the end of the year, the projection would be 63 for next year for kindergarten. These numbers here came from the previous year. So what the numbers are would be projected at the end of the school year this year. So again, taking into account the average number of move-ins and the average drops, these would be the estimated enrollment and how many classes would be needed. That is where the 18 comes from if you add up the number of classes, which actually, as we had mentioned previously, Leal can actually have 19 classrooms in order to keep their dedicated fine arts rooms. So this would actually leave an even vacant classroom, which could be used to help reduce class size for the 4th grade if that's what the principal decided to do. Or if we had unexpectedly a lot of extra emergent bilingual students that we needed to create a classroom, that could also be an option as well. So the similar calculation process was used for the next few slides. As we don't necessarily know exactly how many kids will be coming in 2 or 3 years, I went with the averages, so I can go back and explain where the 63 came from. So if you look, sorry, Joe, can you go back to the early childhood slide? Back. No. Oh, you went too far. Here, thank you. So this, if you look at the number of emergent bilinguals from early childhood, which like I mentioned is what is used as the primary indicator to determine the number of classes, you'll see that the average from every year is 31. So 31, even if we just say 30, emergent bilinguals would match with 30 applicant students. So that's where you would get 60, because we try to maintain the same number, if not more, emergent bilingual students than we do applicant students. So that's where the 60 comes from, if that makes sense. If not, then please stop me and ask. So again, using that average is where the using 60 as the number, which gives you the 63 for every year for kindergarten. So, I mean, you have this information. You can see every year which classes would be at which years would be at 19. You can just keep going, Joe. Like I said, there 27, 28 would be at 19. And then it would start to go down again at 28, 29, which again would leave an empty classroom. And I will turn it over to Kim.
Okay, I'm going to share a couple slides that will detail the enrollment projections for Leal and the challenges with the current strand model, and for DPW as well. So some of those challenges are that there'll only be space for 2 kindergarten classes total in order to maintain those dedicated fine arts classrooms. There would be a limited number of spaces in the single DL kindergarten classroom for Leal students applying to be in DL, 8 to 10 students total. Both the monolingual and dual language kindergarten classrooms will be at or near capacity from the start of the year, and any additional Leal monolingual kinder students will be overflowed. There'd be a limited space for any new students that petition or attend Leal. And Joe, if you just go back one slide. Oh, I sure can. Yes. So looking at this, so looking at blue, that represents monolingual, and green represents dual language. So with the strand model, we would see multilingual ranges from 19 to 26, and dual language from 14 to 23. And this is all at Leal. And looking at an overall projected enrollment of 386. And then looking at the last column, that's what the current strands would be projected for next year. And then the next slide details some of the challenges that I mentioned. Particularly, we're seeing some, and we had that this year, challenges in kindergarten. And when especially monolingual classrooms are at capacity, especially this year, we had to send students to other schools because we didn't have space. And so that's one challenge in particular. And then petitions, there's limited space for any additional petitions as well. Looking at DPW, again, monolingual is represented in blue, and that's those ranges are 16 to 20 in the class ranges, and dual language is 17 to 23. You'll also note that there's some significant disparity between DPW and Leal, where Leal had one class size, for example, that was at 14. And then overall enrollment at DPW is 445, and we've had that cap placed on DPW for several years to not exceed 450 students. And that results in many students that are displaced due to enrollment. And then the next slide will look at some of those challenges. So any additional Dr. Williams monolingual students, as they have been for several years, are overflowed to other schools once we reach that capacity of 450.
And then I've seen in my time here, being my 4th year here, we've had to greatly reduce the number of petitions that are accepted due to the capacity of the school.
So we often talk about remedies to class size issues. We're having these conversations with our union right now through contract negotiations. So as Kim talked about some of the challenges upcoming, here are a couple remedies that we've talked about. I know they're not entirely desirable to everyone, but they are possibilities. So we're trying to be in the realm of possibilities, so we just wanted to put these out there just to make sure that people realize these could be viable options for us. So people who are at Leo, and the general public doesn't know this, but many people here in this room, the before and after school program used to have an office designated just at Leo. The leader of that program recently retired and vacated that office space. The directors are currently relocated to a different space, and that office right now is not being utilized. There was a plan to use it at the beginning of the year, but with this decision upcoming, we kind of paused that just to kind of think about how we might repurpose that space. Next door to that that office is it's kind of a very small classroom. We've used it for fine arts. We've used it for mentoring. I think there's some specialists in there right now. But if we were to take down that wall between that office and that smaller space, that is actually a classroom. And those two spaces would be similar. We haven't measured it out, but it would be very similar to what a classroom would be in that hallway, that northwest hallway at Leo. So that would open up a possibility of one more additional classroom, so moving from 19 to 20 in future years. We have also talked about having a portable. I know portables are not desirable. I know when I started at King, we had 2 portables, and they were a lot of extra work. Joe just experienced Portable World during the pandemic at UMS. But there are some portables that are really nice. I mean, they're an extra cost to the district, but they can be viable spaces for different things. I don't know that we would be putting a classroom in a portable, but by having a portable at Leo, Randy and I have talked about some possible spaces. There's a service drive, is that what you would call that space, in the back of Leo, where we could put a portable that would be close enough to the building for electricity, plumbing, all of those things. So we wouldn't put a full classroom there. We'd move some other activity out there, like, you know, if we had some specialists or adults that are actually currently occupying a classroom, a space that could be used for a classroom, we might locate those folks out to a portable in future years, which would open up a classroom inside the building. So that is another possible remedy. Limiting the number of students enrolled into DL through the application process, we've talked about that before, and of course limiting and pausing petition applications at all levels, which is something we've also talked about.
Okay, so I'll go through the next few slides regarding the parent survey feedback. So as you saw from the handout on Friday, we had 241 total verified responses. So I want to explain the verified responses, or if John wants to chime in how we did verified and unverified, maybe that would. I want to thank John and his team for helping with some of the logistics of the survey and the tech behind it. So John, if you would like to explain that part real quick.
Sure. So there was an initial survey that went out that required email verification, that required you basically to log in to take the survey. We got some feedback that a lot of people didn't have email or didn't feel comfortable submitting their email. So we took all of the people who had submitted the survey initially and took them out of the list of all of the people at both schools. And then we did another token-based survey where all of the people were given a pseudo-random token that they could use to take the survey on the second round that didn't put in their email or require them to log in or give any identifying information. There were some optional questions that did still ask for their name and their students' names just so we knew how many students they had. But that was the token-based system, and that's something that we'll probably also go ahead and use on the superintendent evaluations and some other surveys in the future where we desire anonymity.
Thanks, John. So as you can see, this was the response rate from Leal and Dr. Williams. So Dr. Williams had 60 participants. Below each school, you'll see which program they affiliated their family and children with. You'll see that 20 at Dr. Williams were from non-DL, 2 had kids in both programs, and 38 had students just in DL. In Leal, you'll see the same numbers, non-DL 98. Kids in both programs 6 and kids in dual language 77. There were 2 duplicate responses as well as 11 unverified responses. And again, thank you to John and his team for helping to identify those. So as you'll see the next few slides, those responses were then broken up in a lot of different ways for your information. The first one by racial identification at each building. I do want to point out in the multiracial number that does also include multiracial Latine students that identified as a race plus Hispanic Latino. And then on the next side, this was broken down by language. Family or survey participants did have the option to select multiple languages, which is why you'll see why the numbers don't add up to the numbers at the top. So you can see the different languages that participated. In the next slide, I specifically looked at this question: what is your opinion of the recommendation to unify the Spanish dual language program into Leal School? The next 2 slides look at the participants that responded that are a part of dual language. So of the 40 families, you can see of the 40 families at Dr. Williams, how they selected to respond. Of those responses, 13 of those responses identified as Latine. In Leal, you can see that 83 families from the dual language program responded, and of those 83, 28 were from families that identify as Latine. In the next slide, you'll see the monolingual family response to the same question. Again, there were 20 at Dr. Williams and 98 at Leal, and you can see how they respond. Now, because we do have Latine families that are not participating in monolingual, I wanted to make sure to include those numbers as well. And then this was added since Friday. My apologies, this was not on here when you received it on Friday, was regarding parent transportation. So there was a question on the survey that said, assuming your student or students are assigned to the school you indicated as the best fit for your family, how would your student most likely get to and from school? So again, these next 2 slides are broken up by are they in dual language or are they not in dual language? So you can see those responses for the 40 students that responded from Dr. Williams DL, as well as the ones that responded from Leal and DL. And for the monolingual families, these are the same responses, or the same question, and their responses. So a statement that has frequently been heard in different spaces is the response from the Latine families. You know, I believe what I've heard many times is that the majority of the Latino families don't want this. So I felt it was really important to list the responses specifically from the families in DL that do identify as Latine and how they responded. So of these 41 responses, you would see that 22 supported and 9 were neutral. I want to point out that the 41 responses are only 16% of all of the Latina families we have in the program. So it's, to me, if only 16% are giving a response, it's hard for me to say that the majority didn't want it. And I also want to point out that in the spring, we didn't have enough information for families to say, do you support this being at Leal? It was, if we did this, we don't know where, we don't know when, what do you think? So I do think that for all families that answered this survey, now that they had more information, they were able to better answer the survey. Then this one was another question that the board was curious about last time on the parent survey as well. So do you plan to keep your students in the dual language program and beyond if it's unified at Leal? So you can see at Dr. Williams, of the 40, 32 said that yes, that they would go to Leal. 2 said that my dual language student would stay in the program and move, and my monolingual student would stay at Dr. Williams. 1 family said that they would look at options outside of USD, and 5 said no, my child would just be in the monolingual program instead. The same question at Leal for dual language. As you can see, of the 83, 73 said yes, we'll stay. 3 said that they will keep, if they had a child, this one in particular was if they had a child in both programs. 3 would keep their dual language student at Leal and send their monolingual student somewhere else. And 5 said no, my family plans to explore options outside of the district. 1 said remove the dual language students from dual language, and all the again, a family with a child in both programs would go to a different school. And 1 said no, my student would shift to a monolingual program at a different school. So specifically looking at the next slide, as far as families that are choosing to leave the dual language program, I wanted to illustrate that at Dr. Williams, of those 6 that said that they would be leaving the dual language program, 3 of them were emergent bilingual students, and 3 of them were students that applied to participate in the program. At Leal, of those 7, only 1 of them was an emergent bilingual student. The other 6 were applicant families.
I know one of the things that we talked about at our last meeting was also including teacher voice. So originally, since October, the DL committee put together a teacher survey. However, before distributing the survey, we were requested by the UEA leadership not to send the survey out to DPW and Lil teachers at this time. What the union would like to do instead, and we've had one initial meeting, is they did request to meet with administration to begin to bargain the impact of this recommendation. So that means more formal discussions together as an administrative team and a UEA leadership team to talk about very specifically what the impact of this would mean for teachers. Someone mentioned having who's going to help teachers pack, when would they move, how will they move. Very specific logistical considerations would be part of this bargaining impact, the result of which would be kind of an MOU, or like a memorandum of understanding between administration and the union. You know, kind of holding everybody accountable to what this transition would look like. So we would memorialize that in a more formal way, which is why there is no teacher survey data included in the update for the board today. Those discussions are happening, but I think everyone felt like this meeting needed to happen first before we could more formally describe the interview process, the transfer process. It's really important to teachers to know where students are going to be. And so I think before teachers can make decisions about what schools they may want to transfer to, there's just so much up in the air right now, and until the board has given us a final decision on their wishes, we've kind of paused this. And we will, again, pick those conversations up with UEA leadership as soon as we have more information about what the plan is going to be.
Okay, so back to me in regarding, sure, thank you. additional options that were discussed by the dual language committee, and I want to unpack why. So maybe the next slide is the rationale. So I'll do the why on that slide. We did discuss 2 more options, modified options, with the committee on our last committee meeting last Tuesday. And we asked option XZ and option X delayed as options for members of the committee to vote on in regards to what our next step should be as a committee after feedback from the board in October and the survey in particular and the survey results. And so I'm just going to highlight these options and then talk about the why and then, of course, how the vote ended up. So the combined option XZ was to still have the discussion tonight and then request for a formal vote, but delay the start date of the whole school model until the 24-25 school year in order to spend more time between now and the end of the school year and into the summer and potentially into the fall reviewing the equity audit findings, program evaluation findings, and being more continuing to find ways to engage the Latino, Latina community in getting survey results and their thoughts on the whole school process, because we acknowledge that we don't have their voice in the survey results, and we want that to better understand what they're seeking in terms of dual language program model. We have a lot of assumptions that we all kind of make, and we have a little bit more data this time around, but still not what we wanted from the Latina community. So we discussed option XZ in that way. Option X delayed would be to delay a vote until after we had more time up until the February 7th meeting to more strategically engage Latina families and get a better understanding of what they're seeking and their thoughts on the proposal. And so both of those options were discussed at length and then put on the survey to get feedback from the committee. And so the next slide shows a little bit more of the rationale, which I kind of already discussed, but the limited feedback voice from our Latina families of our emergent bilingual students, wanting to incorporate more feedback from the broader community and stakeholders. We know that it's still, based on survey results, primarily opposed from the monolingual community, particularly at Lille. And so that was one of the rationales for adding these additional options to discuss as a committee, because we saw the survey results, and as some folks mentioned earlier in our discussion in our meeting that we had regarding the survey and the transition plan, those are things that we are thinking about, and that's why we wanted to bring it back to the committee for discussion. Additional time for the BPAC, Bilingual Parent Advisory Committee, to organize and provide feedback. They're just now getting organized and have officers, and we think we could be very strategic with that advisory committee to get more feedback from our families that we're seeking more input from. And then, of course, the equity audit and program evaluation, which we've already discussed as rationales to consider pausing and different options. And so then we proceeded with the committee feedback based on what was discussed in the meetings as well as what was written in the survey results. There were concerns about delaying this decision for another year, which was that option XZ, the combined option. People feel like there needs to be a decision made. Whether that's yes, no, or pause, there just needs to be a decision. And delaying it with uncertainty was what was worrying members of the committee. The concern also that we've been working on this now for a year, almost a year, and just this delaying concern again. And the people on the committee were speaking for monolingual perspective and dual language perspective, being worried about delaying and what that does to everyone's anxiety and worry and potential teacher retention issues was what was discussed. Also, the concern about the decision to make Lille the DL school. There were members of the committee that wanted to take more time to decide on a better placement that does not break up the Lille neighborhood community, require the loss of fine arts classroom, concern of potentially outgrowing. That was a discussion point and a piece of feedback from committee members as to why we should look at other options. And then the concern that the dual language teachers, students, and families deserve a better program now, and really worried about delaying it again and potentially delaying it on and on and on. And so these were concerns that were voiced on both sides of the issue in our committee meeting that we wanted to help paint a picture of the context. As well as continuing feedback was a reminder that the focus of any decision needs to be on children. So really, we oftentimes find ourselves thinking about adult types needs and issues, which is a part of the process and has to be a part of the conversation, but sometimes student needs get put back. And I'm not saying for or against the decision, but that oftentimes happens as adults are working. We center our thoughts and our perspectives without thinking about students, and we can make that argument on both sides of this issue. But that was discussed. Concern that such an impactful decision needs to be more supported by the Latina community, which I've already mentioned. Concern there needs to be more buy-in and understanding from the community before making a move this big. And a reminder that the challenges started this discussion still need to be addressed and that are not going away. So if you decide as a board that we are not moving forward with this, we need to be really intentional about how we're addressing the issues that we originally were wanting to address through the evaluation process. And then this was the vote. So after the discussion, after the options being presented, we sent out a survey to our committee. And the first question was, based on the concerns that was outlined in the email overview of the discussion in the committee meeting, would you still like the committee facilitators, Lupe and I and Jennifer and Kim, proceed with asking the board to vote on option X, which was the board's request in October, based on the feedback and survey results that we've had, right? So this was the question, and this was the response. 61.1% said yes, proceed with what was the direction, what was the request from the October board meeting. 38.9% said no of 18 voters. Okay, so with those results, we felt we needed to go with the majority, albeit only 61%, based on the whole process over the past full year. This was what we're coming back with based on the committee recommendation. So the committee recommendation is, as we all know, Leal School for next school year. So Kim's going to talk about transition plans if this were to be approved and discussed tonight, or approved by the board, then talking through the plans for transitioning.
Okay, so looking at transition plans for students and families, this is a list of some examples, not limited to, and the goal of this was just to provide opportunities in many different modalities to inform our students and families. So that could include family tours led by building administrators, open houses. Video clips are really important about critical moments of the day, such as arrival and dismissal. Leal students going over those proposed building assignments, again, creating literature on the program, brochures, student field trips, family social events, welcoming our families with postcards, but making sure they're aware of events of these opportunities that are shared, and SEL Family Night for families focused on supporting them through these transitions. And then we've also included some examples of transition plans for staff, for one-on-one meetings with HR and staff members to discuss placement or teaching options and decisions. Building administration reaching out to build connections with new staff. Scheduled one-on-ones, again with building leadership. Question and answer sessions with building administrators at the new building. Using current year grade level meetings to building teacher connections with new buildings. Taking advantage of our SIP days or Winter Institute sessions to inform others on opportunities. Also focusing on curriculum and grade level assignments. Team building professional development with dual language and non-dual language staffs. Teacher release time to shadow staff and visit buildings. And working to ensure we create a supportive and respectful transition and transfer process.
Brian, you have questions?
Not questions per se, but I want to start by acknowledging and thanking the committee for their work and the committee members who are not here. I know this has been a tremendous amount of labor, a long period of time through exhausting amounts of effort. And I also want to acknowledge that the community is asking the board to be very clear in where we stand. I can't even count the number of emails that we've gotten that are begging us to say where we stand. So I'm actually, rather than asking questions, which you've gotten my questions over and over and over again, I'm going to just be very clear with where I stand and the pieces of the puzzle that I've been thinking through and how it got me to where I am. And I hope that other board members will do something somewhat similar. And I'll preface my remarks by stating publicly that I do believe the one school model may be the best solution in the long term. However, I am unable to support the committee's recommendation to move to the one school model at Leal next year. And I will be voting against it if it comes up in the next board meeting for a vote. So I want to make that very clear where I stand and then let you know the reasons why I am going to vote against it. The voice of the Latinx community, as you very clearly articulated, must be heard louder. A response rate of 16%, although a very wonderful start, really doesn't tell us if there's support or if there's not support. We just don't know with the 16% response rate. And indeed, one of the public comments questioned me about it. Would I give a survey? Would I interpret results from 16% of the population? I would not be able to really know where we stand. My second concern is we have a pending equity audit and program evaluation. Those are valuable sources of information. We've paid a lot of money for these. It really feels like we need to pause for a minute and hear what is being said, what comes out of those equity audits. And I'm also hopeful that the Latinx families have been a part of that. I assume they have, but we have not heard where we're at with that. So hopefully at some point, Dr. Caffey will fill us in on the progress there. My third concern is about the last pie chart that was presented. A committee vote that is 11 to 7, 60%, 40%, does not compel me personally that there's consensus on a committee. It's very, I mean, we're talking 2 votes off of a split. Any district committee, I would hope, would be much clearer in what their recommendation is, and I'm afraid that committee is not fully unified. That to me suggests that there are still issues we need to work out. I would feel the same way if the board voted 4-3 on this issue. It definitely suggests there are things we need to work out. Program growth. We've heard a lot about the projections. Lots of numbers could be chosen. I appreciate the add drop data. I think that's very useful data. But the projection of 63, that's a 0 growth for several years over time, concerns me because it ties us quite a bit. And my interpretation of that number is we either have to continue to cap enrollment at that roughly 63 number, or we're going to have to tip the balance because our Latinx community is going to grow. That's what every projection would tell us. And so we're going to end up having to tip the percentage of ELL to Spanish language learners. The last 2 points are not directed at the committee themselves, but rather us as a board and the administration. The first is redistricting. At the beginning of this conversation, that was not something that was immediately on my mind as something that was imminent. As we've spoken, it's been talked about as something that's going to happen and must happen much sooner than I thought at the beginning of this conversation. And to me, it's critical we do this all at the same time. If we're going to partially redistrict, we need to fully redistrict as part of a broader plan. And in our last meeting with the auditor, the conversation of Wiley came up, and I also thought at the beginning of this that Wiley was a little further off, but it sounds like it could be remodeled or whatever we're going to do with it sooner than we anticipated. Now, I'm not suggesting Wiley is the place to put dual language. I don't know what is going to happen to Wiley, but we do know that when something is done with Wiley, it's going to close Wiley for a long period of time while we abate the asbestos that's in that building, which will displace whatever the population of Weiler, roughly a couple hundred students again. So all of this concerns me greatly as part of the big picture. How do we as a board, we as a district, envision all this taking place to absolutely minimize disruption? And that's what brought me to the conclusion that I can't support this at this moment. So I recognize these comments are going to be very disappointing to some number of people, particularly the DL teachers who do need additional supports. They've made that very clear. I hear their urgency. I hear their pleas to create those supports and to fix these problems, and I desperately wish we could do it right now. I really do. But in my opinion, we need a comprehensive long-term plan before we can make sure that it's going to be successful. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Brian.
I will appropriately follow as the emotional board member, the data eloquent board member. I mean, as many of you are here tonight, I similarly sit in kind of in this like emotional turmoil because I so desperately want the DL program to get the things it needs. So, as all of you have been, hardcore emailing, good job, I love it. It's super important, and I actually will echo what Tim had said. This is good. This is a lot of energy, and I want to capitalize on that intensity and that involvement. But I sort of, for the last, I don't know, it feels like 2 years for me, but maybe it's 10 years, and maybe it's 6 months. But resting on a precipice where it doesn't really feel like there's a good direction to go. And it is this kind of insurmountable feeling and pressure that no matter which way I turn, inevitably somebody will be disappointed while trying to hold up the needs of our students. So I hope all of us in this room can sort of appreciate just the weight at which this decision, comes on us, feels to us, on top of what the world brings to us every day. And I still am pretty conflicted about how I try to explain all of my investment into this, into schools, that far surpasses my board term. So some things that I do know. I know that our dual language teachers have continually been asking, or have been continually asked to perform and adjust since the creation of this program. And they have often been left to deal with reoccurring issues that include things like unexpected, sustained large class sizes, moving classrooms every year, changing grades, and challenges to district-wide testing. These are really pretty serious, pretty immediate concerns and needs. And I know for many of our DL teachers that this ask, and this I mean this proposal, kind of feels like this like their last plea for help, right? So that is weighing on me and weighing on our students and families. And I sort of already said this, I do know and I see and I hear and I've talked to and I've listened to and I've tried to respond to as many community members, parents, and teachers and staff that have invested a lot of emotional labor in this issue. And I do encourage that we continue that. Please don't step away if your vote gets heard tonight or not, or next week, or yes, it's next week. That's not a time to step away and celebrate or not. That's when you dig in more. So I'm encouraging and asking all of the public, right? We need you. Please don't leave. We're always needing volunteers. We have no volunteers in the middle school, in case anyone's wondering, 0. We need mentors. And in general, right, community support schools. On a personal side, I have taught in a trailer. That is the, what do we call those? Thank you. I call it a trailer, my bad. I have taught in a portable for a year. It was not awesome. I did not feel like I was part of the school. They are not super friendly or welcoming or inviting. I did my damnedest. I even painted a mural in it. Didn't help. And although that might be like a very short-term solution, I still don't feel like that is addressing our space needs. I think that another part of this is just like the idea of change and implementing dramatic change when we know that the change can be like, we have to be able to do that when it can be successfully sustained. And I believe that has been said by others in this room and other people that I have spoken to. But I think it's become increasingly clear to me as we continue this conversation that, and we've heard more of this tonight, but we do have many of our students that do have IEPs, and I do feel like this idea of a plan and how that will be addressed, like that's a pretty serious disruption. Many of those students are relying on long-standing trusted relationships that have taken several years to forge. And that is a concern that if we can say this is going to happen and we can stand and believe in it and stand behind it, that it can last for those folks. I think that you can kind of get through one change in support, but I think if we were to say, oh, we've now outgrown something again so quickly, that's devastating. For all of us for many different reasons, but in particular for students receiving very specialized services. But on that topic of change, I think that like even more so watching this presentation tonight, like our community continues to grow and evolve, and we need to prepare for change. So this felt very abrupt and maybe scary or uninformed and all of the things that were frustrating about it, but like at some point we need to prepare for change. Like our community is going to continue and shift, and I think as a district, like it's clear to me we have space needs and space issues that go way beyond the DL program. Like I see us butting up against numbers at Leal, at DPW. It breaks my heart that families get turned away from their neighborhood school. So like we're gonna have to do some really deep diving to figure out what are neighborhood schools? Do we still have neighborhood schools? How do we define neighborhood schools? Who is served by that, who is not? And yeah, I mean, it's like this, what I sort of feel like is the DL teachers really trying to present and say this is what I need has sort of like just opened up this giant hole of like, okay, we've got equity audits, we've got UEA contract negotiations, we've got potentially redistricting on the table, and they all coincide and are woven together. And it's like this just constant battle of macro micro, and I feel like we're trying to do our best to serve both of those needs at the same time, and it's really impossible. But I think the district really has to sort of take some time to step back to like figure out what we're gonna do with like all of our students, right? I mean, these numbers actually make me like very nervous about just like how we're going to address the needs of our students. Like our schools seem like just too small right now, like across the board maybe. And it's incredibly painful because I know last time I sat here, I wanted this to work. I really wanted to feel like those teachers that I've heard from for like 10 years, we could be like, yes, like you got it, you did it, like I know you're gonna feel really good about having space with your colleagues, which one of our other teachers also spoke about, like how important that is. But I still don't see a plan. Like I think when I say a plan, I mean like legitimately like, this is how many spaces exist in this school. This is how many teachers will be moving. This is how your IEP services will match up. This is how you will get there. Like that is a plan, and in that finite detail. I believe, Lupe, I think you said something about more information to answer the survey. I don't know. I didn't write enough down, but I believe it was about like, if you have more information, you can make a better informed decision. And that is still a problem that we see from people who are being asked. And we have been asking since October. So we have to be giving them more information. Like we still should not have families that don't have enough information to answer these survey questions. So like again, that to me is just another signal that like, we're gonna have to slow down and do this in conjunction with other things, even though I know we have immediate needs right now. So, as it stands, I cannot vote yes on this proposal. I desperately want to, but I think my role right now is to also think about the health of the district as a whole. And I want us to be successful, and I want this program to be successful. And I know, I mean, truly, I've done some hard things, but this is really hard. Told you I was the emotional one. But sorry, I don't know if I don't know what else you can give me right now, and I don't know what else you can give me next week to be convinced that the health of our district is going to survive from this move right now. But that does not mean we don't continue to address the real serious needs of growth and change that have to happen. Sorry.
No need to apologize. No need to apologize. Thank you, Laura. Anybody else wish to speak now?
Brian and Laura were very eloquently stated a lot of the things that I was thinking of. And I also want to thank everybody in the committee and all of the administrators in central office and elsewhere who've been helping on this. I know you've lost probably more sleep than all of us have, and I don't want that for anybody, because this is a daily struggle. Just opening my inbox is a daily struggle. To all of you in the audience who are still here in the room, and all of the people watching who have written to us as a board, to me personally, I apologize for not being able to write back to all of you. I've read all your emails. I have taken them to heart, and some of you I have been able to respond to. I've had phone calls, I've had personal meetings, and I'm hearing you, and I'm feeling what you're feeling, and I just want you to accept my apology for not getting back in touch with you. It was not intentional. We're all trying to get as much information in together, so that's not by way of excuse. But to say, I can thank you all because you've done a lot of homework on our behalf. You have brought a lot of information and knowledge and backgrounds to this research that I think has enhanced the discussion. People who have backgrounds in statistics, in economics, in education, in special education, in psychology, all of you community members have added to this. I'm so grateful to you all for being so passionate about this, because this is what drives us to make good decisions in the long run for the kids. I've always said this to other people in the district, and when I was running for re-election, is that even angry emails from people who are upset about something are good, because they are information that help inform us on how to move forward for our kids. And that is the only thing that I care about. I've already made enemies with decisions I've made on this board in the past. Probably make a few more. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to try and help those kids. What it boils down to since the last time we talked is I have heard from community members and parents plenty. I wanted to hear from the people who I wasn't actually getting contacted for unsolicited. I was trying to reach out to people in the actual buildings. I wanted to hear from people who would be directly affected, but also it occurred to me to maybe try and talk to people who aren't directly affected, but who will be indirectly affected by this. And I think that, to echo what Laura said, we need to be really thorough and get that feedback. And it's got to, in moving forward so quickly with a decision like this, I think there are a lot of people who haven't been able to say what they feel, or who haven't been asked, or even, said they had a choice to give an opinion. And I think that moving to a whole school model, which I think is probably also in the best interest of everybody involved. I said that before in October, and I still stand by it, but I don't want to approach it as an either or. It's either DPW or it's Leal. Well, which one of these schools are we going to do a whole school model? I asked in October that we leave no stone unturned. And what I meant by that was, I think we need to approach this as a district thing. If we're going to put it in one building, we got to talk to every single building in this district. And I know that up until this point it hasn't made sense, because we were still feeling out how the board felt and what information could be gathered. But it's been clear to me now that this is much bigger than just dual language. This is a 116 question. And if we're moving kids anywhere, Each one of our schools has its own culture, its own climate, its own needs, its own strengths and weaknesses. And all of those buildings need to be considered, and they need to be consulted with how moving kids will affect them. And that also feeds into the question of, if we move it to a whole school, we need to think about any one of our elementary schools being a potential whole school building, not just the two who have historically housed the Spanish dual language program. I'm not saying that it wouldn't eventually land on one of those schools, but I think we have to just treat everything as being equal and start with this from a lens of, okay, we have this program, we need to put it in one place. Let's look at all the possibilities. And that's been made more clear to me since October, since talking to people who said, nobody asked me, and being surprised by those conversations. And they were very frank and they were very honest. But, you know, I want all of us to be listening to that and to ask everybody. So, can we take the equity audit into consideration? I think we should. I think the suggestion of even making it a strategic plan item, major item, is also a good one, because if we rush this, we will get it wrong. I guarantee you that the unintended consequences will continue to hit us for years to come that we aren't even talking about today. And I worry about the growth being quick and rapid, as Brian and Laura said, that we would outgrow any building that we went to within 2 years. That's not something I want to rush into. I was told by one administrator that the families of people who are emergent Spanish speakers, they need to be able to trust who they're sending their kids to school with, and they need to trust the people in those buildings, because they're building a community themselves in this city who, you know, they're isolated. A lot of them who've just moved here or don't know their way around, they build the trust to uproot them in 2 years or however many years' time just because we've outgrown the program. Feels wrong, and it feels like it would be marginalizing them even further. But again, there are students in all of our buildings who are already marginalized for other various reasons, and I want to make sure that they're going to be okay with an influx of kids coming from wherever. So I'm trying not to be random here. I'm trying to be focused because it's getting late, but I just want us to be deliberate, and I want us to get the voices of everybody who haven't been asked yet. And as we've had discussions on other programs in the past, if we don't have the support of the teachers and the people in all of the buildings, we won't have support for the program as a whole. I want to make sure that the teachers involved in this in every single school are on board with it, are able to work towards it, and when we have their support and their willingness to pitch in, it's going to be so much easier to do. Right now I'm feeling so much fear and resistance that I think that rushing ahead is just absolutely not going to work for us in the long run. I do have one quick question that was brought up just tonight at this slide, that with the new options X plus Z and X delayed, can you provide more information on exactly why those were suggested but then rejected in the end? And I know you probably mentioned already, Joe, a little bit, but can you just revisit it? Because when you first read them out, I thought, okay, then that's more of a discussion, but then why did everything circle back around to 23, 24?
The members of the committee that voted against those options, so to say, so we asked folks to say, in light of these additional options, do you still request that the committee facilitators proceed with option X, the original option? And 61% said yes, 30 whatever, right? The pie chart on the other slide. Most of the reason being in the conversation and in the written feedback responses on the survey is, of those who wanted to continue with option X, was not to delay it any further.
Okay.
Basically, that was the main reason. There are some folks that feel like a delay will result in never. There are some folks that feel like a delay means delaying what's best, what they believe to be best for their kids, and delaying that. And so it was a mixture of reasons as to why the delay they felt would result in kind of what Laura was saying earlier in her comment about feeling like this is the last plea, is the only thing that the individuals who said this, feel like is left to improve the program the way it needs to be improved.
Well, I will respond personally. I wouldn't take this as a last plea. This is not the end for me. I don't want anybody to feel that we're shutting a door right now. I mean, and I'm very saddened that it's gotten to this crisis point with our dual language teachers and staff that they've needed and needed and needed, and we haven't been able to provide for so many years that now it's hit this tipping point. And I can understand how hollow it would feel to be told, well, we support you, but not for this year. I mean, I'm not living that crisis every day, and I don't want to be all high-handed and say, oh, it'll happen, you know. But I am hearing them, and I don't want them to lose hope. I just want to be deliberate about this. I don't want to rush into it, and I want to have buy-in. And I also want to know that our central office administration is listening to all of our building administrators and teachers too, that it is a genuine collaboration, because you know, at the very beginning, there was a whole large group of people, especially in my neighborhood in Woona, who were the majority of the people who were monolingual speakers who were petitioning to be a part of the dual language program, were just shocked at the outset that that's not what this program does anymore. I mean, they were saying, I thought that this was an enrichment program. They didn't use those words, but there were a lot of people in my neighborhood who thought, well, wait a minute, I thought this was supposed to be beneficial to English speakers learning Spanish too. Well, yes, of course, as we all know, that was the intent in the beginning, but we've outgrown that. We've changed as a district. We've changed as a program. But that's just an example of the type of understanding that people have to achieve to get to where we are now, and I don't feel like we're there yet. So I just really want to make sure that everybody understands what's moving. I do trust that our staff and everybody in the district will be able to move forward. I mean, like I said, and as was pointed out to me again, yes, I am risk averse, but I'm not absolutely against any change. In my personal life or in any other area I live, when you explain to me why something is good and you show me the way that it's going to happen and I feel comfortable with it, yay, let's do it. And I'm sure there are a lot of families who would feel the same way. Like, you know what, this might be a little uncomfortable for a while, but it's going to get us to a good place. And trust us, we're working with you, we hear you every step of the way, and it can be done. But just, it feels too much like we're not getting enough information, and we're trying really hard to fit into a timeline that feels kind of artificial right now. So I hope that came across the way it was intended, which is I support the program, I want the program to succeed, I want to do it right.
Go over here.
Well, I asked Ann to go first because if she said what I was thinking she was going to say, I didn't have to talk too much. But is there anything that you could hear in the next week that would change your mind, Ann?
You mean between saying yes to 23-24
Yeah.
or that would make me want to make it next year?
No.
I don't see that it would be. I think 23-24 is too soon.
Yeah, I agree. So I will, first off, I will thank Dr. Wiemelt for his words at the beginning in regards to the events today. I think that was very well said. And I'll just say additionally that the UMS staff has been through so much with so many things for the last 5+ years that I know of, that their days at work has got to be so just crazy. And I commend all of those people for coming back tomorrow, or not tomorrow, I guess, the e-learning day, but the day after. And then I will also thank all the people that gave public comment today, because all those words are very well stated, and actually decreases the amount I need to talk as well. So there's a couple things I was going to say, though, regardless, because I have actually made notes, and this is the first time I've ever speaking from notes. I usually just fly off the cuff. So the thing that I just wanted to touch base on is the reason, as far as I can remember, because many people are asking the board, why did we want to push this in the first place? And I just have to say, as my response to many of those emails is that this is not a Board of Education initiative. This is something that this committee put together and has proposed. And now we are listening to it first in May, then in October, and now. And so my understanding of the reason this committee was put forth in the first place was about teacher retention in the dual language program. And what has happened since the October meeting when we talked about this is I have participated in these SAC lunches as part of the UEA discussions at different schools. And one thing that is really striking to me is that when I've been to Thomas Paine and Yankee Ridge, well, Yankee Ridge, there's French dual language there, I guess, but particularly at Thomas Paine, one of the complaints the teachers have, that building is an all monolingual building, is that teacher collaboration amongst their grades is not, I mean, they don't have enough time for that, you know, and they're all in the same building. So they say, like, by the time they drop their kids off their things, they only have 20 minutes, and that's not enough to actually collaborate amongst the same grade. And that's actually the stuff they have that they're saying is not enough. But that is what part of what the dual language teachers are hoping for by being in the same school. So at the last board meeting, when I was saying that I am doubtful and pessimistic that making a single school would actually resolve these issues, I can say that again based off of my experiences there. So the next thing I just want to point out is that it's just interesting to me as an aside that when we talk about 16% response rate from the Latinx families, that's not enough to make a decision on. But when we're talking about SROs and we had 10% response rate from the high school students, it was like, that's golden. Those guys really want SROs. So why with the SROs was that such wonderful data? But with this, it's not. And I think it's just because of the underlying agenda to create a single dual language school as soon as possible. That's the only thing I can say in regards to that. So there's been some questions that I've been asking since May that I don't think have still been answered yet. And I don't know if the reason for that is because there's this agenda to push the single dual language school and you don't want to answer those questions, or you're just hoping the board passes this first and then you're addressing it. I don't know. But one such question is how are the emergent bilingual students actually doing in the dual language program? Are they even benefiting from it? There was a slide on today's presentation that actually had the varying test scores, or not scores, but tests that were given, and a comment made about the difficulty in comparing over 10 years as there's different scores. But one thing that was unique I noted today is this access test about English proficiency. So if you have students in the dual language program and you say 80% of them are proficient in English by 3rd grade, for example, or whatever the score or the mark is, whereas people in the isolated ESL program do it by 1st grade, then you would say, well, maybe the ESL program is actually better, and we should be looking at that, So having no data about how these kids are doing over 10 years does not make sense to me to actually make such a huge change in a program. But like everyone up here has echoed or said thus far, is that everyone here wants the dual language program to succeed, but we need to make sure we're doing it right. So the other thing that's been really brought up by a lot of folks is about class sizes and about Leal being outgrown in size. And I heard from the presentation the rationale behind how the slides of today look different than the slides of October. But the thing that I will point out is using an average number from 2011 to 2022 is not actually what's happening in 2024, 25 in the future. Because, if you think back to 2011, there was actually conversations from the board about closing the neighborhood school of Yankee Ridge, So at that time, there's very few students in this town. And now we're busting at the seams. We're talking about how you can't have people petition to go to schools. Dr. Williams is going to top out if there's 7 more kids there this year. It's a very different place now than it was 10 years ago. So you can't really, I can't really swallow the idea that there's going to be space at Leal. the next thing I was going to say is, prior to tonight, I thought I was the only one voting against this. So what I have done, as you may have seen, I've dropped my Leal t-shirt and went with Wiley, because that apparently is my new neighborhood school, living in West Michigan. So one thing I was going to say about Wiley, just because, two things about Wiley. One is, when we're talking about the Illinois report card, something that was kind of glossed over, that's I think very important, is Wiley's been on this comprehensive status for many years, and Dr. Heinhorst and her staff there have worked very hard to get that up to the commendable status. So, you know, Wiley has come quite a far ways, and I am hopeful they will continue that trajectory. So, you know, if anybody was needing to go there next year, I think it's a great place to go. As I say, I'm a t-shirt wearing member now. But along those lines, as we heard at the 2 board meetings ago, I think we're supposedly have enough money to actually start the Wiley renovation sooner than projected. And along those lines, when I proposed at the last board meeting that we talked about this, I did not get much traction about building a new school on the north side of town. I think the new idea to think about is actually when renovating Wiley, if you make it into like a 5-strand school, then you can make that a single dual language school where you're probably not going to run out of space. And that could be part of a full redistricting plan in about 3 years maybe. And at that point, you can answer all the questions of where everyone's going, what the class sizes are going to be, et cetera. Because one of the questions I've been asking this whole time is where, you know, we have what is the class size projections at Leal, but what about all the other schools? You know, where is everybody going to go? You know, by you know, doing dual language only at Leal, is that going to make Wiley's class sizes go up to 29 per class or something, you know? Where the other question along those lines is, next year, if Leal is a single dual language school, and the year after, where are all the people that currently live in the Leal school district who are new to the school going to go? Like, do they get to just choose as well? You know, that's a question I've asked, and I have not heard an answer either. So, yeah, I guess that was about it. So, that is, I don't really have any specific questions about anything.
Can I offer one response?
Please, go ahead.
We do have plenty of multilingual dual language t-shirts if you ever want one of those.
Actually, I'll take one of those, actually.
Sure.
Large, please. I'm probably going to say something that's going to make everybody angry here for different reasons. But I want to start off, I guess, talking about, you know, my journey with regards to the single building model decision. You know, when I first heard word of this, my initial reaction was pretty negative. I had had conversations with my compatriots in Champaign for quite a while, and I said, I just don't understand why you stick all of your Hispanic kids in a single building. And you know, the obvious, well, we have reasons for that. You do your side of Wright Street. So, okay, fine. And so I first heard about this idea behind the scenes. I was like, initially, it took me months to come around to it, and in large part, it was me having to come to grips with things I don't have to worry about, right? I never had to worry about my kid who needed a speech pathologist having access to a speech pathologist who could speak English. I never had to worry that if my kindergartner got separated from his class and there was some sort of a critical event in the school, I never had to worry about my kid finding somebody he could talk to get in. I never had to worry about my parents coming to the school and finding somebody who could help them find their grandchild in the building. You know, so it took a fair amount of introspection and trying to see things from perspective of a Latinx that sold me on the single building model. I'm absolutely convinced that that's the right thing for this district to do. And once you make that decision, once you decide that this is better for a class of kids who desperately need support, then, you know, by all means, how do we get there as quickly as possible? But as much as what Brian pointed out today, you start looking at that. How do we get there as quickly as possible? It opens up all these other questions, including what to do with the facilities in this district, including what to do with Wiley in terms of. I didn't want to, you know, change the redistricting boundaries in this town, moving kids, monolingual kids from Leal into Wiley, which is correctly a wonderful school. All of our schools in this town have value, and the whole notion that one school is so far ahead and preferable to others, if that's really the case, we have a real problem with equity in this town. That aside, I didn't want to move kids from Leal to Wiley and then 2 years later have to move them again. You know, maybe if it was 6 years, those kids could matriculate through. That would be another question. But as it is, as much as everyone else here has said, I think we need to thank the dual language community and be eternally grateful for them for bringing energy and attention to the fact that their needs are not being met in this district. And they need to be met. And this district needs to commit to a course of action that will get them what they need. It just may not be in the fall of '23. And I wish there was a way for us as a board to formalize that, to commit to it, to make sure it happens, because it needs to happen. But there's too many unanswered questions between now and 7 days from now for me to be able to vote yes on it. I'm sorry to tell this to the committee. I have supported the decision to go to dual language. I've supported the move to go to Prairie and now Williams. So it breaks my heart to tell that group of people no. But there's too many things that need to be decided before a week from today for me to be able to say yes. I'm very sorry. I do want to go back to some of the things that Ravi mentioned real quick. I sent it late today. I sent out a spreadsheet that showed the population of the schools and the schools overall. It's been flat. We have not seen growth in terms of our overall elementary population in this town for the entirety of my board service. It has been roughly 2,000 plus or minus 50. It's been flat. We've seen a lot of changes in where those students come from. They're coming from the area around Williams School. They're not coming around the area around Yankee Ridge. They're not coming around the area around Leal either, right? That's why we're shipping 90 kids a day from that neighborhood over to Yankee Ridge. And also during this time, we have added nearly a school's worth of buildings in each remodel we've had. So when we're talking about putting a 5-strand school in the middle of town, we're going to be creating this surplus of elementary buildings in this district. I don't know if we'll ever be able to fill. So when we look at the question about what to do with this building in the center of our city, we needed to take a really comprehensive look at where our kids are, where our room, and we're adding more elementary classrooms this fall when Thomas Paine is done. So we have to take a whole comprehensive look, involve the entire community in making a decision about what to do with Wiley School, whether it's going to stay a school, whether it's going to be something else, whether we have enough space in our 5 other buildings to house all of our students. We have to answer all these questions. We're not going to do any of that in the next 7 days. So, sorry for a long-winded answer, but that's where I stand, and I would recommend we not have a action item on the next week's agenda for bringing this up for a vote.
Paul, can I just add to what you said? I agree with what you said, and if anything is going to be picked on any school, we keep talking about Wiley. Let's talk to the Wiley people first. Absolutely first. They all need to be a part. And I'm not saying I wanted anything done to Wiley, but anything that happens to any school, talk to them first. And I would ask all the board members to please talk to buildings individually, the administrators, the teachers, the support staff. Find out what the culture and climate is of all of our schools. They're all very different. The kids are very different. They have very different needs. I mean, the Wiley kids are very special and have their own needs. They are a very neighborhood-like school in the way that Leal is, but for very, very different reasons. And, you know, I haven't done my due diligence on going all the schools, but I want to stand by something that says I've talked to the people who really matter in this discussion, and I want to make sure that we all do that. All 7 of us owe it to them.
All right, does anybody else have anything other to ask or to say? Okay, I'm taking it this will not be an action item on our next agenda. Okay, all right, I thank you. But I still want to discuss with, I want to thank the deal committee, and I want to discuss somehow before my term ends, a way that we could start a process to commit to needed changes in that program to give them the support they need.
I do plan to reach out to Tori, who has a very ill family member, and Brenda, who had another commitment, because I've been taking really good notes, and I'd like to hear their feedback and comments, so we have the perspective of everyone represented. Not that I'm going to ask them to do
but
that
you're
out
absolutely
loud,
right.
but I definitely want to hear their voice. So.
All right, thank you. I think that closes the discussion. There is no call for future executives. Well, there is actually. There's student discipline on Monday, meetings for that. There's no superintendent's report tonight because.
Well, I do want to say something. I don't have a formal report, but we've kind of all alluded to the events of today at UMS. While this loss is unimaginable to all of us, and as Paul already did at the beginning, thank you, Paul, for that, and Joe's words and Ravi, we still want to extend our heartfelt sympathy to the family, to the friends of this student, to all the staff, all the teachers. It was really difficult to sit in a space and have to tell 7 boys about their friend, and to talk to the teachers today who had this student in their classroom this morning. So we will be sending an email to the district tomorrow. Today, we wanted to give the family a little privacy this evening. That's why we did not release the name intentionally. We wanted to give the family time to process with their family and friends privately. But tomorrow we'll be sharing that information more publicly with the name of the student. To allow time for UMS staff and students to grieve and process these events today. As you've heard, and anybody listening tonight, I really hope you get the message that there is e-learning tomorrow. Crisis support staff will be available for anyone who needs it, whether it's students, staff, or parents and family members tomorrow morning. This is a difficult time for all of us. We appreciate UMS pulling together. Ravi said it very appropriately that it has been a tough year everywhere, especially at UHS and UMS. And to add one more thing to that community is rough. But they pulled together today, as we do in the district. It's what we do. And so I applaud the UMS family, everyone who wrapped around the family today, and we'll get through this as we do everything else. So, thank you.
Board reports. Does anybody have a report to get tonight? Go ahead, Ann.
Did we just, I don't remember even, did we mention the conference in Chicago? I mean, that's happened since our last board
That's
meeting,
happened
right?
since our last board meeting. If you want to talk about that now, or you can wait until next,
Next week
you can do it next week when Brenda's here.
Next week, yes, when Brenda's here, we will
I will
put
do the
that
same.
on the list.
Anyone else wish to give a board report? If not, the chair would welcome a motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all.